So Council, if I can have your attention, please. Councilor Nero, you can have your seat. Councilor Romano, you can have your seat, please. So we are live, so we'll say hello to everybody in Sault Ste. Marie who's tuned in to watch tonight, our first budget deliberation, and also our media partners, and thank them for broadcasting the meeting and reporting on it. I will pass the matter off to Mr. Clerk to start the meeting, and then we'll get into our agenda.
Mr. Mayor, members of Council, under Agenda Item 1, approve agenda as presented. Motion by Councilors Romano and Butland that the agenda for the December 5th, 2016 budget meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Council, I will note to you that there are some PowerPoint slides that the Treasurer will be putting up on the screen as we begin deliberations, and you will be getting a hard copy of those in a few minutes. Under Item 2, declarations of pecuniary interest.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't see it on the agenda, but just in case there's discussion on police services, I would declare a conflict of interest. Spouse employed by police services.
That's not in our deliberations tonight, Councilor Turco. Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I as well, it's not on as a specific item, but firefighters realignment plan. If discussed individually, I'll declare a conflict on that.
Sure.
As part of the overall budget, I don't have a problem.
It's not part of the agenda to discuss the plan individually. I mean, obviously, if a councilor's looking to do that, that would be a councilor's.
Right, at that point, I'll declare a conflict.
But otherwise, I don't think you're declaring a conflict on the fire service budget. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Under Agenda Item 3, 2017 Budget Input, the report of the Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer, is attached for the consideration of Council, and a motion by Councilors Krumpatich and Christian. Resolved that the report of the Chief Financial Officer, Treasurer, concerning 2017 Budget Input be received as information.
Are there any questions on the Budget Input report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
Under Item 4, 2017 Operating Budget, a motion by Councilors Romano and Butland, resolved that City Council proceed into Committee of the Whole to consider the following matter referred to it for consideration, 2017 budget deliberations.
All in favor? Carried.
Mr. Mayor, members of Council, we'll begin with the presentation from the CAO.
Mr. Horseman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council, to the audience here and those of you at home watching our deliberations this evening. Wanted to say a few words in advance of the budget discussions and deliberations, but mostly it will be the CFO that will be acting as the facilitator for any of the discussions back and forth, and will be handling all of the questions and making sure it's getting dispatched to the appropriate individuals where and when you have questions on the items that are going to be before you. In terms of a preamble, I think I need to start by saying this is a transition year and, of course, a very difficult one. We have challenges that include economic uncertainty, unanticipated costs such as the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, presumptive care issues that you've heard about before, the post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD challenges, and we have shrinking reserves as well. We've been, of course, economically particularly pressured on a couple of fronts, which have caused some angst in the community, but have been met in terms of being challenges. Regarding transition, much has been accomplished over the past 18 months, and will be undertaken in 2017 that will not be really fully realized until 2018. These include, as examples, the 2016-2020 Corporate Strategic Plan, the DSAB transition, including daycare, the Fire Services Realignment Plan, the downtown investments in investment generally, as examples there, Gore Street and other assessment investments, and of course the Community Adjustment Committee and community plans that have been brought forward and are in the process of being completed. The 2017 budget before you, therefore, has grappled with both the challenges and transition issues while maintaining or attempting to maintain services at council-approved levels. So going through the slide, I'll take you through a couple of the highlights of what's now before you, and then I'll turn it over to the CFO. And in advance of doing, we'll explain the agenda as we go forward. So the preliminary 2017 budget, you saw on November 27th that there was a 6.63% tax levy increase that was described or identified. It's now identified at 5.63%, and the CFO will explain how we got to that level. And this includes maintaining services at 2.02%. Outside levies will be at 1.37%, and the impact of the one-year reduction relating to surplus and reserves being used in 2016 is 2.24%. This represents approximately $165 a year, or roughly $14 per month for the average residential household in Sault Ste. Marie, at a value of about $186,500. Excluding the 2016 use of surplus and reserves for a one-year tax reprieve, the increase is 3.39%. This is consistent with past years. Over the last 11 or 12 years, the average increase before applying in surplus and reserves has been 3.72%. Looking at comparable municipalities, we are not alone. This is a northern and this is an Ontario phenomena that is facing us for a variety of reasons as described earlier. Comparable northern municipalities, therefore, are also at the 4 to 6% range in terms of levy increases that are being considered in most cases. Since 2011, and this is where city staff has tackled these issues by maintaining services, and actually what's before you tonight, even within the 5.63, represents a decrease, and I'll repeat that, a decrease in the salary and benefits for staff in the departments. And yet with that, and that's been used, that decrease has been used despite impacts of collective bargaining increases, impacts of other benefits such as WSIB and PTSD. We still have a negative salary and benefit line. Despite that, we're still at the 5.63. And one of the big issues here is, of course, the use of surplus and reserves, which is simply not sustainable as a means of financial management. To give you sort of a flavor of it, in 2011, the surplus ranged from about $500,000 to just over $2 million in 2014. The 2014 use of surplus alone represents about a 1.9% levy increase in 2017. Surpluses have been shrinking in recent years due to extraordinary pressures. Again, the ones most recently are the WSIB and PTSD. With the decrease in surplus, reserves have been tapped into in the last couple of years, including $105,585 in 2015 and $1.789 million in 2016. Again, the use of surplus and reserve is not sustainable, and in fact, 2017 are not available for us to be able to tap, to be able to bring that pressure down. At the same time, non-salary costs have traditionally, over the last decade, have been frozen despite contractual CPI increases, and we've again in this year been able to manage at the last year's level in terms of contracted services despite CPI increases. This is not sustainable, however. Options are therefore going to be provided to you, given that the pressures that you've had, because we recognize that for the community, for the mayor and council, that 5.63% is a difficult number. And so there's going to be some options provided here tonight that allow for council to address the 2.24% that is identified as the service surpluses and reserves that were utilized last year, and how those may be offset to get us into a point where we could have a sustainable path going forward. The totals presented here do not include supplementary items. Those will nonetheless be identified for council for its consideration, but what we're talking about with the 5.63% does not currently include anything for the supplementary requests that have come through. So that's my preamble. I'll just give you a quick overview of the agenda and process as we go forward. I'll be turning it to CFO Treasurer Shell, who will be taking you through some of the more of the details in terms of the numbers. Following her 2 or 3 slides, there will be a presentation, 4 slides each, of the service areas and legal department. who will present their budgets relative to the maintaining of services component or the 2.02% levy that's been described. Please note that corporate services includes the CAO office and the mayor's office, and the details are found in the packages that have been presented to you in terms of the agenda. The CFO treasurer, then after the service areas have spoken, will present options that we've just described and able to get down further from the 5.63%. They are listed from order of least to most impactful in terms of service levels and relating to the implementation of the 2016-2020 corporate strategic plan. Following that, the CFO and treasurer will outline supplementary items. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would ask that we pass it to CFO Shell to take us through the next slides in the agenda.
Sure, we have Councillor Myers. Do you have a procedural question, Councillor Myers?
No, I have a question on the CAO's presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Slide 3, Mr. Horstman, can you just take a moment? You alluded to it, but I'd like to just clearly understand a little bit more. What are the non-salary costs that you state have been frozen for the last 10 years? Can you give us some example of, it's in the second line up there, non-salary costs have been frozen for a decade. I think that's a critically important point. I'd like to understand a little bit further.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. I would turn that over to the CFO. Well, non-salary costs, again, are contracted services, but she could explain some of the specifics for that.
An example, maybe. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. Our non-salary costs are just that. These are all of our expenses that are not salary related. It'll be your materials and supplies, purchase services, contracted services. Some items over the last year or two, we have been adding a contractual increase if there was a contract approved by council, such as for garbage collection, asphalt, concrete, that type of thing. But historically, over the years, staff was always told they had to maintain those costs at the same level as the previous year. And as you know, council never approved any kind of supplementary item, whether it was contractual or not. So all of those expenses have been absorbed by the department for quite a long time. And in some cases, when we were looking for decreases, especially in the last couple of years, some of those items have been cut even further.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, CFO Shell, you can take us to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only have a couple slides, and it's more or less just to kind of take us where we are and where we're going to try to get to. This first slide basically shows the levy, and that it's made up of 3 distinct areas. The first area to the far right is 2.24%, which is the surplus and reserves. And as noted by the CAO, the previous reprieve of taxes provided to the taxpayers via this is not part of the normal ongoing levy. The normal levy for the 2017 preliminary budget as adjusted is the 3.39, which is made up of the first 2 columns. Of this levy, not all is controlled or managed by staff. 1.37% is related to levy boards and outside agencies. Levy boards, they include Algoma Public Health, the DSAB, and the Conservation Authority, all of which have the legislated ability to provide a levy to the municipality to be added to its taxes. So these items aren't even controllable by council themselves. Outside agency funding, aside from the Police Services Board, they're controlled and set by council. Staff manages the column on the far left, and that is the levy relating to maintaining services. For 2017, items outside the normal operations account for the bulk of the increase. This slide you've seen over the years. In the preliminary budget, you saw a similar slide. This one I arranged a little bit differently so that you can really see what's happened with the maintaining services for 2017. You can see that we've reduced it from 3.02% that was presented to council on November 21st to 2.02. Adjustments to estimates based upon updated information accounts for the change. Details of changes will be shown prior to council deliberations. The maintaining services was greatly affected by items outside of normal operations, some of which staff has little control over. Those are the items in the top in the blue shaded area. You can see the total there is 2.12%. Note the total increase for maintaining services was 2.02. can easily be said that the total increase is related to these items. Normal operational changes actually reflect a decrease to the levy, and again, those are the ones in the gray area near the bottom, and it shows a negative 0.11% decrease. Salary and benefit costs have been decreased by $80,000, even after accounting for the WSIB ongoing increase for police and fire and contractual increases. Staff also reduced their department budgets by $770,000 to offset increases, some of which are additional salary and benefit decreases on top of the $80,000 already shown. The presentations to Council tonight will outline some of the measures that have been taken by the various departments. I will now turn the meeting back to the clerk to begin the service area presentations.
Sorry, Mr. Clerk, before we go back to the clerk, there was some, I think, really important information there. Are there any questions about that information? Councillor Bruni?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CFO. Regarding the lost administration revenue of DSAB, it's $700,000, which is 0.67%. What about the wages? Like, where would that fit in if we're saving on wages? Would that be that would be a reduction in our budget, correct?
The wages that are associated with the employees that used to be the city employees, those have all been transferred over to the DSAB, who they now manage that. So when I calculated the salaries and benefit savings of $80,000, I took that out of the equation, because or else it would skew it and we would be showing that we were down like, you know, several $1 million in salaries and benefits, which really isn't the case. So this is apples to apples when you're looking at the $80,000 decrease.
I'm sorry, the 80,000 is the decrease?
It's the total decrease in city salaries and benefits between 2015 and 2016.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Myers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just pursuing the DSAB transition question for a minute. So the lost administration at 702 is as it's noted here, it was considered revenue, and it was revenue that the city was able to garner as a result of administrating the District Social Service Administrative Board, who is now direct service providing themselves. But just following a little further on Councillor Bruni's point, the 110 employees who are no longer part of the corporate system here at the corporation, there would be costs associated, not the employees, but the services that were delivered that are no longer being delivered. There'd be adjustments within the city, too, that would be savings, right? I'll use legal as one example, and I'm not picking on legal, so don't give me dirty looks there, Nuala and Mel. But I know that, for example, I believe that $50,000 was our portion that DSAB paid. There's 6 of us here on the DSAB board, of which I'm one. That $50,000 was attributed to legal. But you're no longer providing the service to us either. So would legal find some way of adjusting themselves with that $50,000 that's no longer service delivery? I'm just using that as an example hypothetically. I'm not going to pick on legal. So just using that to demonstrate what my question is. That falls out through finance, IT, HR, many of the services.
I think that might be a little clearer as we go through the departmental budgets. I think that some of the departmental budgets show savings, and they can point to those. And Malcolm would be a good example because he's next, and I think there's some adjustments in his budget.
So can we be fair to say at this point, because I think those are savings that aren't just about DSAB transition, though. They're savings, period, in those departments, if I remember correctly in looking at the presentation.
And some of them relate, though some of them relate.
Yes.
It's hard to divide it.
So I just want to be fair in saying that the 702 is lost administration revenue when you're looking simply at the revenue, but there may be an offset to some extent as well. Is it fair to say that?
That's correct.
Thank you. I just want to make that point. Thank you.
I'd like to clarify one point, Ms. Schell, is that you said that the decrease in the staff salaries of 80,000 was 15 over 16. Isn't it 16 over 17?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you're correct.
Yeah,
I got my years mixed up.
So staff has, it's not, we're looking at.
It's 16 budget over 17
Okay,
budget.
Yes.
so.
Yeah. We knew that.
Okay, well, I didn't know.
No,
if
but you're
people
right, in the
at home
public,
did.
though.
So
Yeah.
the decrease that we're showing here is next year compared to this year.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Clerk? Sorry, Mr. Nero? Councilor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question on process before Mr. White gets going. If I know supplementary is not in the budget right now. If we want to consider an item in supplementary, when do you want that presented?
We're going to come to supplementary near the end. We're going to have the staff do all of the budget presentations, and then we'll go through the numbers at that point, and then we'll consider supplementary. So we're doing that later on in the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fada? Councilor Fada? Jeez.
Just something I just want to clarify, maybe from my own state of mind and maybe others on council, but to maintain services, Shelley, you're saying that it's gonna be 2.202% of the budget, right? That's what we're looking at, just to maintain what we have right now, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fada, that is correct.
Okay, so I just have a question following on that, and two items that come to mind. One is the fire contract. There's no contract in place yet for 2017. We know that's going to add up to X number of dollars. That's not worked into the equation, correct?
Councilor Fada, so they're without a contract right now. That contract has to be negotiated. As that contract's negotiated, the CFO can correct me if I'm wrong, the city staff in the budget has a contingency that they set aside to deal with that for when it is negotiated. So they provide for that, taking a look at what they think the cost might be. But we don't know what that cost is going to be until the contract's actually negotiated and settled. So we can't budget for the actual cost of that contract because it's still an open contract.
Well, my concern is whether it is in fact 2.02% or whether it's going to be something greater than that. My sense is that it's going to be something greater than 2.02.
Well, that's the best information we have right now, and that's the information staff's giving you.
And the other item that I wanted to make reference to in my conversation with Peter Nero had to do with absenteeism. That, on average, equates to about...
That's not relevant to this, though, Councilor.
But it's still monies that are going to be paid out.
Okay, but why don't you wait until we get to you can ask the fire chief when we get to the fire services budget. That's not a proper chief question to ask.
I'm just, referring to this 2.02. It's a figure that's supposed to represent the total that it's going to cost us just to maintain what we have.
And that's what the treasurer of the city is telling us.
I would suggest that it's going to be more than that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Clerk?
Yes, for corporate services, as was referred to earlier, for ease of presentation, we are including the figures from the mayor's office and the CEO's office and the financials of this. As council is aware, the corporate services area includes the following functional areas: clerks, finance, and human resources. For the 2017 budget, as you look through, I'll just touch on a couple of the things. One, you will see some significant reductions in revenue, and for the most part, that is the DSAB reduction in DSAB revenue flowing through our cost area. So we did take a significant revenue decrease in there. We did have a couple of mandatory operating level increases, which I'll discuss in the next slide. Overall, though, by initiating some savings cuts that were referred to in the CFO Treasurer slide as in part of that overall pass through to do some savings to offset some of these contractual increases and revenue adjustments. We end up being 2.57% over last year's figures. Go ahead. Aside from the revenue decreases, a couple of the areas where we had some operating level increases, we do have some increased expense in IT hardware and software costs that are associated with our phasing out of the Unix-based systems. As council is aware, we are moving to get away from those systems and move on to more current vendor-provided systems. And there were also some training dollars needed to be increased. WMIS training will now be offered only online through the province, and we needed to spend some money to make sure we're able to access those systems and provide that mandatory training to our staff. Some of the things that we did do on our first pass of savings, there is a reduction of 2.0 full-time positions and 2 student positions. Some of that is directly related to the reduction in DSAB revenue. So further to Councillor Meyer's question, that is an example of an adjustment that it's been made. There were reductions in staff training, employee benefit rationalization, materials and service reductions, including hard copy agenda printing for council meetings. That would take effect should this budget be passed.
Did everybody get that point? So if this budget's passed, city staff won't be printing the budget anymore. Not the budget, I apologize, printing the council package.
Total annual savings in this past for corporate services, CAOs and mayor's offices were $218,931, and these reductions are included in the 5.63% budget submission. If there are no questions on that, we can move to the community development and enterprise services.
Any question? Okay, Mr. Councilor Nero.
I'm not sure if it's a question for Mr. White or Ms. Schell. If I look at the budget summary and look the change from year over year, and I try and find the 218,931 that was identified in Phase 1 savings, are those noted by the change year over year column on the budget summary?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, those savings are in there. However, they're not individually noted. But
okay, so
your
if I
2017 budget figure, the overall budget figure, was significantly higher before we took those savings out. So instead of 11,039,515, you would have had the 200 and some thousand on top of that.
Okay, and it's probably my problem trying to read this the right way. If I look at the budget summary, the one that was up on the screen earlier, and I look at the changes year over year, and I look at the negatives if you had a reduction from 2016 to 2017, those totals are 248,815. But yet, on your savings in Phase 1, it's noted that the amount is 218,931. Those two numbers are not the same?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, there may have been an additional adjustment made with some of our other budget adjustments that didn't get captured. The 218,000 figure that I refer to were the savings that we specifically identified in that first pass-through. There may be something that's another adjustment somewhere that's been done that would have added that other, I believe it's about 30,000 that you're referring
There's
to.
a difference of about 30.
The CFO can answer this. There was, the clerk is specifically identifying what they did to bring the levy down to that level. That doesn't take into account other decreases that might have already been in the budget at the 6.68, right? So if there was a year-over-year decrease that brought it to 6.68, that was in there. And they did a pass-through to bring it down further. And then I guess they could have captured all of the decreases to make this number look larger, but they just captured the decreases where they took that first pass. So
Okay.
the CFO can directly answer that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, just looking at that slide there's one line missing. So the increase, like if you look at your preliminary budget for corporate services, the decrease is 477,500 or 4.95%. That might help you reconcile, like there was other decreases, and then on top of that, as the clerk has alluded to, there was almost $220,000 additional on top of that.
So I need to compare it to the preliminary numbers on the 6.63.
Correct. It looks like one line got cut off on there.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So we have Councillor Hupinen and then Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Mr. White. The efficiencies, it says reduction of 2 full-time employee positions. Did those positions go to elsewhere in the corporation, or were they just 2 people that we had to say you don't have a job anymore?
That hasn't been,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hoopinen. Those represent reductions. We have, where possible, attempted to make those reductions through attrition. And for the full-time positions, that's where we have been successful in doing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bruni.
I think Mr. White did touch on it, but the fees and user charges decreased to the 166,000. That is strictly from DSAP, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Yes, that's attributed to the reduction in DSAP revenue. It does occur in different ways. Sometimes we had a specific contractual arrangement with DSAP to provide something like accounting services, which was worth a certain amount. With others, there was a general revenue applied to the corporate services area in managing certain services, but when you add them all together, yes, it is attributed to the reduction in DSAB revenue.
And the other income in the revenue, it's dropped slightly to 14,500. What is other income?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, actually the other income is likely, I'll turn to the CFO Treasurer, I believe that's the specific contractual arrangement we had for accounting services provided to the DSAB.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, it's actually a whole bunch of different things. We have accounting services for the library, we have discounts, sundry revenue. There's also, under tax, there's $45,000 for tax certificates and $17,500 for tax search confirmations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you. This is going to be a recurring theme for me. So the reduction is not all attributed by any means to DSAB transition. There's a number of other things that the CFO just mentioned. And also then the two full-time equivalent positions, would it be fair to, can you identify, would either of those been, again, related to the fact that we now are not delivering some of those services to DSAB?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, I can go as far as saying probably 1.5 of those positions can be attributed to that.
Okay, so that's the point I was trying to make earlier. There's some offset here. So thank you very much.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mayor. To you, Mr. Malcolm White. Maintenance and repairs. I see there's a difference from 2016 to 2017. Can you explain why there's a difference and define what is maintenance and repairs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I believe that relates to, and I'll check with the CFO Treasurer, I believe that relates mostly to some of the IT expenses that I referred to in the slide, the additional costings that we are going to incur with our migration out of Unix-based platforms. Actually, I'll check with the manager of IT, who's the slideshow.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I have the detail in front of me, and it's actually for software support in our information technology area. About 75,000 of it is for upgrades to various systems. We have a lot of systems throughout the whole corporation, and as you know, most systems have to be upgraded on a regular basis, whether it be every 2 or 3 years, et cetera. We just don't have the budget to maintain that anymore, and the costs keep escalating there. So that's 75. The other 40 was for software support agreements. Again, we have contractual agreements for every software program that we use here. And again, licensing fees are increasing, and we just can't manage it within the budget anymore.
I think, Councillor Hollingsworth, one of the things, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but we have some very dated systems, and some of the systems need to be upgraded. And the manager of IT is sitting right there, so he could pipe in. But that expense relates to we're just using some really antiquated software around here. If I'm incorrect, please correct me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, that is correct. Also, efficiencies, when you're looking at efficiencies, you're turning to technology to help you with those efficiencies, and that's where we have an increase in the budget because of that, as well as the fact that we are running some antiquated software that we now are trying to refresh and also tie into some of the existing systems to make them more interactive.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the explanation. Two other question. I know that your department probably looked at every agreement, looked at every software, and prioritized what is really necessary, and that could, or what could be delayed for another year. I'm sure you prioritized everything.
That is correct, yes.
And my last question is, when it comes down to contracts, I know this past year there's some contracts that were old. So all contracts, to your knowledge, have been reviewed?
That is correct, yes.
And to your knowledge, we probably won't have any surprised fees?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Councilor Romano.
Thank you. Just further to that last line of questioning with respect to the phone systems, I heard the word efficiencies. Would that save us money, the new? Is there any potential for savings through any of these new systems we're going to implement?
I don't think he was talking about phone systems. Were you speaking about, there was nothing about phone systems.
The new systems were...
It's IT software.
Sorry, my apologies. Will that in any way generate, well, from an efficiency perspective, is it going to save money?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano. All systems that we put in, there is going to be efficiencies because it makes everybody's job easier to do. Over time, it may equate to an attritional savings through employees, but most importantly, it will help with the customer service, whether it be to internal customers or to external customers of the corporation.
So, will it save money?
Bottom line, I can't predict how much it will save because every system is different. Some will, and some, like I said, will be more of an efficiency and customer service type savings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we can move on to Mr. Ver.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Council is aware, the Community Development Enterprise Services Group is a newly comprised service area that consists of three primary departments. We have the Building Department that manages all aspects of building inspection, permitting, and bylaw enforcement. We have the Planning and Enterprises Services Group that manages all matters related to development approvals, incentive programs, and our downtown development. And we also have the Community Centers, or Community Services, which is a broad array of services. We're looking at cemeteries, community centers, daycare operations, the SR Center, transit and parking, and recreation and culture. I should point out that we're already starting to see, I've been here a short time, but staff has commented, we're already starting to see the benefits of the organizational realignment and the collaboration amongst these groups. Taking a look at our overall budget on the next slide, because there are a number of departments in Community Development Enterprise Services, it rolls up into a broader number. I'd be happy to answer any further questions on the details. But as a unit, Community Development and Enterprise Services is coming in with a 1.6% increase. And that aligns with the 4.39% decrease in revenues and a decrease of about 1.23% in expenses over the previous year. Included in our department's efforts to drive savings, our initial budget included organizational realignment, where possible through attrition, service reductions. We're looking at some reduction in summer students and some slight decreases at the senior centers. I should note that we've been fortunate to receive new sources of revenue from the senior secretariat as part of our budget reductions, and some expense reductions to decrease overall by $219,305. I think it's important to note that staff worked hard to examine revenues and expenses and come up with ways they could improve performance for the citizens of Sault Ste. Marie, and we're conscious of the levy impacts. Also, it's important to note the community development enterprise service activities directly relate to 4 strategic plan focus areas in terms of quality of life, community development, and partnerships, infrastructure, and service delivery. And further decrease in those areas would certainly limit our ability to provide those services or reallocate funds to advance some of the other priority items that we've identified for community development. Obviously, a lot of these services are citizen-facing services that we provide in our area and contribute directly to quality of life for the citizens of Sault Ste. Marie, and are vital components to retaining and attracting citizens in the community. I should note as well that there's certainly a good team in place in the group, and they've been proactive in searching for ways to attract additional funding to the organization from outside the organization where possible. So we've done a number of initiatives in the past: the Downtown Development Initiative, rental housing community improvement plan, the work that was done at Bellevue Park with playground equipment, the pump track, disc golf. These are all examples of areas where staff has proactively gone out and looked for ways to partner with other levels of government, with other service organizations to deliver on the requirements for the community. And although I know this is a tough budget year for City Hall, certainly, I think it's important to recognize that there are a number of positive things happening in the community. There's a number of strengths that the community has, and certainly our group is very encouraged by a number of opportunities here, and we think there's going to be further positive announcements in the community in terms of a community development standpoint. Going forward, it's no doubt that focused effort and staff resources will be required to deliver on the strategic plan, and not all of these have to come from City Hall funding, but a portion will, because in any funding programs, or most funding programs, there's a portion that's required from the city, and then there's the other funding that we can leverage as a part of that. So we certainly look forward to advancing strategic activities to build prosperity based on community priorities and build opportunities alongside our other community partners here in Sault Ste. Marie.
We have Councillor Christian, followed by Councillor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Mr. Bear, thanks for the presentation. Some might argue you're in the enviable position of offering services in the community that makes us feel good that we're living in Sault Ste. Marie. So I know, your group and yourself will do a good job. And congratulations on those savings that you were able to find. Very much appreciated. Just looking at your budget summary, I didn't catch it in the presentation. Reduction in user fees of $184,000. Can you explain what that is? Could you drill into that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, the user fees, because it's quite a broad department, and there's a number of areas there's a number of kind of ins and outs into that kind of global number, and I'll go through them in a bit more detail for you. In terms of fees and user charges, the cemeteries is down about $105,000. This is largely due to the loss of the crematorium revenue.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, we have daycare in our department, so there was a decrease in daycare revenues that the city will not realize. On the flip side, recreation and culture revenues are up about $87,000, and seniors drop-in center revenues of about $46,000. There's a new method we're using for charging for services in those areas that's really driving that increase. Also, transit revenues are up $101,000, parking revenues up about $40,000, and building fees and user charges are up $229,000. So when you add all those different components together, that's kind of how you get to the $89,000 decline.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Councillor Christian?
Yep.
Okay, so Councillor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I'm looking at my hard copy, perhaps for the last time.
Perhaps.
But I do have
very likely.
I do have a printer at home, so.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I don't know if this is an appropriate question for Mr. Baird or maybe Mr. Nero, our Human Resources. I noticed the word came up there, Mr. Baird, the word reduction several times, in particular the summer students. Now, this came up before at City Council in my tenure, and I remember one year I thought we were going to eliminate the hiring of summer students to cut back and find some savings. When you say reduction, is there given some thought? In fact, I was asked this question. Is there given some thought? We're all going to make some hard decisions here tonight about full reduction on things like summer students for a year or two?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco. What we did talk about with staff is areas where we could reduce hours and not have a significant impact on the service levels we're providing in the community. And I should note as well that a lot of the summer students are providing critical work in our area, certainly, in order to maintain the services that we're providing and the parks and recreation facilities we have. So we do rely on them as a critical component of the delivery of our services.
Thank you. The reason why I ask it, we could say that about just a number of things here tonight. The same rationale that you use for the students, we could use for, we just had the IT people say the same thing, that it's important to have. So we could use that rationale about a number of items that we're going to bring up here tonight. But thank you very much.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Baird, did I understand you to say that the organizational realignment was complete in your department?
No, not complete.
Not complete?
Forward.
Does it look like it will be complete in 2017?
Right. The items we put forward would be items that would be complete in 2017.
So once the realignment is completed, would you recognize more savings in that department or reductions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, the reductions we're anticipating have already been factored in.
Okay. So once organizational realignment is complete, it'll put all the positions into place, but we already have them in our budget.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have Councillor Kompadich.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and to Mr. Rivera. And I think my similar question, and I think you answered it, it's regarding the reduction in students and hours. And so there'll be a minimal, if any, reduction in services if these jobs are taken away through the summer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kompadich, yes. Staff really looked at where we could possibly shave the student hours and not have a significant impact on services.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So we have Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Vair. In your document, the highlights, the Community Development Enterprise Services, under Planning and Enterprise Services, you do speak to the Planning Department undertaking the community development projects such as the Downtown Development Initiative. Elsewhere on our budget this evening under supplemental is the Downtown Development request. Is that something, Mr. Mayor, that we should be talking about at this portion or not? We'll just leave that to be under supplemental, but it comes under Mr. Baird.
Let's leave the supplemental discussions to supplemental.
Okay.
At this portion, just ask him about the matters in his report.
Okay, so in his report, I guess where I'm going is that we identified the $219,000 in savings, and I guess where I'm going is, would there be an opportunity, I'll just park it, it can be a rhetorical question, to offset the request for the Downtown Development Initiative? So I'll park it, I can make it rhetorical.
Yeah, why don't we just park that?
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Butland?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The clerk talked about a reduction of 2 full-time and 2 summer students and the term attrition. I think this is going to come up often. If others don't bring it up, I certainly will bring it up. We have a staff complement, I believe, has to be confirmed, of 750. And we've had a staff complement of 750 for a number of years. And rather than talking layoffs at any time, because there are considerable layoffs in the community that we certainly are aware of. Attrition is it's an easier, more acceptable way of reducing staff. And so I believe, in fact, I probably know the answer, but I think I should get it confirmed. The numbers of people, there's Mr. Nero, there he is here. Numbers of people that you would anticipate are going to be retiring in the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. Do we have a handle on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland. In the next 18 months, we have a projection of 78 employees across the corporation that would be eligible for unreduced retirement.
So I don't know for anybody else, but to me, that's a very large number of people.
10%.
78 people leaving in 18 months. So to my way of thinking, and I hope others will support it, this is a much easier way of reducing staff, hopefully without reducing services, reallocating some of the job.
Councillor Butler, maybe we can get clarity from the senior management team if that is in fact their intention, if they're intending to do this through attrition as opposed to layoffs.
Sure.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland. We've taken a lot of care to look at and consider those that are eligible in terms of retirement, but we're also very cognizant of the service levels that are being provided, and there's certain skill sets that need to be matching up to those positions that we don't have elsewhere in the organization. So it's not a straight one-to-one where as a position individual retires, that position goes, because those positions are oftentimes necessary. So the work that's being done at the senior management team is to coordinate if there is that one comes up. If you can, you might have to go outside, but can you find other areas that you could provide in terms of changes or not or late hirings to be able to deal with the with those pressures? But we have definitely taken into consideration the opportunity, however level it is, for attrition to be the means as opposed to a layoff being the means to deal with the process.
Thank you for that clarification. It's very helpful. And I don't want to oversimplify this, but certainly I think it is an opportunity, and I hope we will do it, well, I'm sure you will, department by department, and it may be a much easier way for us to get to where we would like to go without reduction in service. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
So we have Councillor Compadich, and then Councillor Fada, then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and to HR Peter Nero. Just a question on the 78 eligible to retire, the 10%. I'm just curious, out of the 78 that are eligible, do you know how many have actually signed up and are ready to go?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Compadich, out of the 78, 4 have given indication that they're prepared to formally retire. Again, I'd like to stress to council, they're eligible for unreduced pensions. That does not mean they are planning on retiring.
Yeah, that's exactly the point we were trying to raise. Thank you.
So we have Councillor Fada.
Would I be able to ask a question to the manager of daycares?
About?
I just have a question regarding the process that we've been going through from now until the September. Is it September of 2017?
Is it a budget? It's a budgetary question.
Well, it has to do with the process and in terms of how it affects the maximizing of the income that's being generated through this phasing out process. My question, I just want to understand that we're doing this in such a way as we're maximizing the amount of income, i.e. the number of young students that are going through there. And I guess my point is I'm just concerned that we're maximizing the amount of return that we're getting and that we haven't taken too many steps forward and then suddenly closing the door on parents who probably still wanted to continue at the Jesse Irving Center. I'm just wondering whether the process that we've gone through has maximized the amount of income that's been generated for the city. I'm not questioning what they're doing.
We're reducing spaces though, Councillor Fata. The income would be going down.
But between now and 2000 and third quarter of 2017, we're still operating the Jesse Irving. My question basically has to do with, are we maximizing the amount of return that we're getting as far as income? Or have we moved things so fast that kids are not in spots that they could still be until the door closes for the final time?
I think that plan is proceeding as it was approved, Councillor Fata, and so we're reducing our revenues there because we're reducing the number of spaces we have.
Understandably, I guess I just wanted to get a sense that we are maximizing the amount of return, the amount of income that we're generating until such time as it closes.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fata. We're following the plan that was identified with DSAB and with Council and was approved by Council. We are working diligently with all of the parents and with the daycare workers that are there, and we're following it through legislative requirements that apply to the daycare. And within those parameters, we are maximizing what it is that we're going to be doing in terms of the city relative to the expenses and to the revenues.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. There he is. Thank you. I just want to also just say a couple comments. I know that the staff have been doing a very good job in looking for cost cutting, so including yourself, so thank you. And I know that staff have been looking at ways to freeze wages. And I know the last 10 years, we've been very good at not going over and spending more for supplies, as an example. So I see this as a couple of examples of implementing some great ideas to basically control our costs as we move future. Here's my question. When you talked to Councillor Butland, answering his question with regards to the potential 78 people that potentially could retire, but you just said about 4 are eligible. Oh, 4 pending, okay. Correction. 78 potentially could retire. And we know that we don't want our services to be implemented. We want to make sure we still have good services to our individuals, to our citizens. So therefore, when you bring new people into these positions, will you consider relooking at the salary scale? Or has it been relooked at? Will it be a project in the future so that we can adjust salaries, knowing that we are challenged when it comes to our cost savings? Potentially, this might be an opportunity to readjust our salaries to reflect cost savings.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I think when you look at cost-saving measures through attrition, you want to analyze in detail every position and justify its existence similarly to what the CAO has indicated based on a certain skill set. So true savings are when you can eliminate a position through attrition and not replace the position. You have to be very cognizant of where those functions go because it can create some other challenges. Where you can look at reducing the level of responsibility of a replaced position for a particular track, if I can call it that, that will have to go through our job evaluation system. We have to maintain pay equity. We have to maintain internal equity. So if you're going to have someone retire and replace them at a lower paid position, the position must be commensurate with the skill set and the responsibilities that go along with the job in order to substantiate the reduced salary.
We have to keep I'd like to keep focused on the budget that's before us. I don't disagree with a larger assessment of that, Councillor Hollingsworth, but that's a bigger project that isn't going to affect this budget because there's nothing we can do in the very immediate term about the current salary grid. Mm-hmm. Any other questions for Mr. Ver? Seeing none, we can move on. Mr. Clerk, so are we doing
It's the Public Works and Engineering Services.
Are you taking this, Mr. Girardi, or is Ms. Hamilton Beach?
No, I'll Mayor and Council, the slide being presented shows 7 divisions under Public Works and Engineering and a brief description of the areas of responsibility. You have administration for Public Works, operations, parks, waste management, buildings and equipment, and traffic and communication, along with engineering. I'd like to thank at this time for the members of my team that are here tonight representing their areas. This year's budget will look different than last year due to the restructuring that came into effect in June of 2016. The budget consists of Public Works operations and engineering, which includes the maintenance of the Civic Center and the OW building on Albert Street. The Building Division and Planning Division now reside under Community Services and Enterprise, along with Transit and Cemeteries. Here with me today to explain the budget is the Director of Public Works, Susan Hamilton Beach, and the Director of Engineering, Don Elliott. I will now ask the Director of Public Works to provide an overview of the Works budget, and following that, the Director of Engineering will do the same.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Public Works budget. My talking points tonight will focus on those line items that we have seen a change in. However, by all means, we welcome any questions that you may have. If we begin with our overall revenue, if we look at the line fees and user charges, this reflects a decrease of $187,000, and this is largely due to the reduction in landfill revenue. Currently, we were working on a business plan where both Public Works and Engineering with the AECOM consulting team so that we can have an effective plan in effect for a sustainable future. Critically, the sludge component of our waste stream needs to be addressed before any operational changes may occur. We look at line item government grants. This includes the Waste Diversion Ontario funding that is received for our recycling program and any student funding. The expenditures, salaries and benefits, this represents 68% of Public Works' overall expenditures, accounting for the 222 employees in total, and is based on the rates that have been approved in the negotiated collective agreements. Utilities and fuel, this includes water and electric charges, diesel, gas, and natural gas costs. Materials and supplies, this includes purchases for our operations such as sand, salt, culverts, asphalt, concrete, and granular materials. Taxes and license, this covers property tax, predominantly the landfill. Purchased and contract services, this encompasses our refuse collection and recycling contracts, which are locked in for multiple year contracts. Transfer to own funds, this includes the building and equipment fund and the landfill reserve. And the landfill reserve is what has been reduced by $97,818. As attention has been drawn to the Public Works budget, we would like to note that even with the increase in salaries reflected each year, we continue to fall at or below the CPI percentage increase for the respective year. We achieve this by continuing to find efficiencies in our operation.
Thank you, Susan. Now we'll have Don do the engineering budget.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, thanks for this opportunity. This is the Engineering Division operating budget. As you know, the Engineering Division is heavily involved in capital works as well, which is a report that's later on in your agenda. The Engineering Division also includes building services, which is for Civic Center and for Ontario Works Building. I'll give you 4 highlights on the lines on the slide that you see before you. Salaries, you'll see a reduction there. The Engineering Division has decided to close the materials test lab, so that is 1 full-time equivalent staff that is being reduced, and that will be through attrition. Line item utilities and fuel, there's many things in there. It includes the power and energy for Civic Center, Ontario Works, wastewater treatment plants, all the pumping stations. It also includes the cost to the PUC for hydrants and for street lights. The street light is the biggest component. It actually sees, you see a large reduction there That has to do mainly with the fact that there's debt payment on the LED street light upgrade, and there's a little bit of a downturn in energy costs because of for a portion of 2016 or of 2017, we'll have street lights, LED street lights, which use less energy. Purchase and contract services, that's another big component of this budget. The main component there is the wastewater treatment plant operations contract with PUC, and also Civic Center security. And finally, I'll highlight the transfer to owned funds, $340,000. A full there's 40,000 there for small items, equipment that the engineering division needs. 1.3 million is the miscellaneous construction budget, the bulk of which goes to road resurfacing and surface treatment. It also covers things like biennial bridge inspection, aqueduct inspections, etc., several other small things. The miscellaneous construction list has a $15 million unfunded list of projects that have been placed on the list through the years. And this budget, unfortunately, is insufficient to cover very many of those projects, if any, because most of this budget has to go to resurfacing. So I can turn it back over to Larry, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead. Mr. Girardi.
Thank you. Okay. We have our Phase 1 savings included in the 2017 budget. So to achieve the 5.63 levy increase for 2017 budget, we will permanently reduce our complement by 2 more employees. This reduction in complement will cause a ripple effect in 3 key areas, reducing the level of service in each. Snow removal is typically a function of 2 factors: traffic safety and complaint response. It is proposed to cut $96,267 to the snow removal budget, which equates to 2 FTEs for 4 months. The risks associated with the reduction is staff will have to prioritize safety issues and reduce response to complaints. If winter is extreme, expenditure for reserve would be required. The second area affected is our leaf and yard waste program. This will operate in May and June, and it will be canceled for July, August, and September, resuming in October. It is proposed that this program be cut by 3 months, which is a reduction of 2 FTEs for 3 months, a savings of $54,700. Our household hazardous waste site will be reduced to 1 Saturday a month from November to March. This will coincide with the landfill winter program of being open 1 Saturday per month. This cut represents 2 FTEs for 5 months. The risk with this cut is the reduction in service for the public after its recent relocation. However, it's predicted that during the winter months, we will experience a significant reduction in customers. That's for a savings of $57,835. Keep in mind all the public works dollar values represent salaries, benefits, and city-owned equipment. And again, as Don had mentioned, the engineering test lab will be closing at the end of 2016, which will affect 1 FTE. That's a lab technician. The city will contract aggregate, concrete, and asphalt materials testing to private test labs for a savings of $87,754. The annual savings for the changes is $297,787. Added to the 2016 savings, Public Works has accomplished in excess of $45,000 of in-kind work, which includes Bonsu, Rotary Fest, Relay for Life, Plummer Hospital Waterfront Park, Queen Street Parkette, several small items which include anything from signs to floats. It's been talked that there's also, well, there's reasons why the Public Works budget attempts to come in on budget. Winter control certainly may cause differences at times. Some of our efficiencies annually, especially for 2016, which is our asphalt recycler, is estimated at $52,000. Recycled asphalt byproduct granular material for $12,000. Topsoil, annual savings of $25,000. Our layoff for 2016 produced $136,750. Our operations division PUC emergency repairs, we've taken on repairs for PUC through the winter months now, especially the ones on mains and collectors. That was $85,000 in revenue. Our gapping savings for 2016 is $134,500. Our landfill hour reduction is $55,000, and that was passed by council last year. So in 2016, our efficiency savings was $500,250. This is what we do to come in on budget. Public Works and Engineering primary duty is to provide mandatory services which follow the guidelines of for road maintenance for the taxpayers of Sault Ste. Marie. As we're once again asked to reduce costs and knowing we're presently operating with minimal employees, we have no choice but to reduce the little non-essential services we have left to achieve this goal as listed above. Reducing road maintenance programs in engineering just shifts the burden from engineering to the Works Division. If capital road work is reduced, maintenance budgets increase, and so does the risk of increased number of claims. The only thing left with potential savings are programs as suggested above: snowbank removal, leaf and yard waste curbside pickup, reducing operating hours for HHW for the winter. As stated several times in the past, by myself, we continue to look for efficiencies, but we're at the point that we cannot reduce without the elimination of long-standing programs. This is the conclusion of the Public Works Engineering budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Girardi. So we have Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Girardi, regarding the sidewalk plowing, Mr. Girardi, what are we saving, going to be saving for this year? Would you know?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll pass it on to Susan Hamilton Beach, who is involved with the sidewalk program.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we estimate approximately $45,000 in savings.
And for the leaf and yard waste residential collection, is this common practice in other municipalities? And I'm just asking because when I read this, I was...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, it's not like we looked into other communities to see what they were doing on this one. The reason why we did it was there is a reduction during summer months. Our heaviest months are the spring and fall. So we decided to keep the program. And again, we were asked to look for opportunities. This was an opportunity. So that's why we picked still running the program in the spring, in the fall, but shutting it down in the summer.
And for snow removal, basically it's this snow banks?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bruni, that's exactly. We have to do the sidewalks that we state we're doing. We have to plow the roads. But there are things like that snow banks. That is a non-essential service, believe it or not, even in a city like Sault Ste. Marie where we get a lot of snow. So there will be calls that we take in the residential areas that we may not be able to take now. We'll just focus on the mains and the collectors.
So if the snowbank removals is removed in the residential areas, obviously the roads will become more narrow, catch basins will be covered with the snowbanks.
Correct.
Would it be a safety issue? I mean, flooding, et cetera? I'm asking you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, during our winter months, we are a northern community with a lot of snow, for potential of a lot of snow. So is there safety issues? There's safety issues daily when we run our operations. There were safety issues this morning. But quite frankly, we monitor and we manage those according to the budgets that were provided.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councillor Hoopinen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Girardi, I just have a bit of an issue with the Public Works snow removal reduction. I know that in Ward 3 that a lot of my constituents called to have snowbanks removed, and it was mainly because of a safety issue for them not being able to get out of their driveway safely. I really don't think that would be a good thing to do. I mean, it was difficult last year, and if we're going to be reducing again, I think we're compromising here, and I don't think we should be doing that.
Okay. So we have Councillor Butland.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. To Ms. Hamilton Beach. Landfill revenue, how much has it decreased?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland, we're estimating approximately 190 to 200,000. So as you're well aware, and as we presented last year, we do have an American competitor for which they follow different rules, as well as totally different approvals are set in process. So we do our best. We are very competitive with other Canadian municipalities in the sense of our prices, and we obviously still have our operational costs.
190 to 200. I was going to ask you, what is that reduction mainly attributed to? It's to the industrial, commercial, institutional trucking their waste to Dafter, Michigan, if I can be very specific.
You're correct. And it's a difficult aspect to conceive because although it is saving landfill space, right, which is a benefit to us, that's time, and landfill, we are gaining that space, we do have a cost associated with it, or revenue associated with it that we do lose.
I meant to have the legislation, the province, I think, has tabled for quite a long period of time, a rather dramatic change in legislation for waste diversion in Ontario. You're always on top of things. Has this already been decreed, legislation has passed, or is this in committee stage and so on and so forth? Or do you know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland. Definitely regulations are changing daily in the world of waste. I've been in this business now for many years, and there are things which we're suspecting in the sense of funding, which may affect our community. I don't believe anything has been nailed down to date, and often our municipality is falling short on the population to fall into the affected categories with these regulations.
Okay. I should have had the piece of legislation here this evening. The government is they're going full forward with new legislation telling corporations if when you produce something and you package it 1, 2, and 3 times, you're responsible for the disposition of that waste. And this is, as I say, a tremendous piece of legislation. And if anything, I'll put a resolution next time and say, we need to get behind them and say, yes, let's go forward, because that would be a boon to landfill, a boon to the environment, and a boon to the community. Well, I'm just nonplussed that we're still shipping.
We're not.
Recycling
Yeah.
rate in Sault
Correct. We're not shipping.
No,
We're not.
Sorry. What is our recycling rate at this point in time? We were held off at about 38%.
We're still at that amount. Until we jump into organics, which is quite a cost to it, we'll remain at that value.
Okay. Thanks for the leniency, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questions, I believe, to Mr. Girardi. On the service reductions piece of about $298,000, I think the figure I heard on the closing of the lab was about $86,000 of that?
That's correct. It's 87, 754, yeah.
Okay, so 88. Can you break down, please, what the snow removal, leaf yard, and the closing of the hazardous waste? Can you break those down? I imagine you have those figures handy to make up the balance of the $211,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. It's for the snow removal, it's 96,267. For leaf and yard waste program, it's 54,700. And for the household hazardous waste, it's 57,835.
Thank you.
And of course, engineering was 87.
Yes, thank you. So the 96,267, I mean, I totally concur with what Councillor Huppinen said. I think that last year was certainly an exceptional winter. We hardly had a winter in many ways. But over my 10 years on council, and many others here longer than I am, that is one of the most common questions we get is around the snowbank removal. I don't believe that the whole 96 is just snowbank removal, or you would have called it snowbank removal. You called it snow removal. So what portion of it is the snowbank cutback program?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. When I talk about snowbank removal, that could be the removal of the snowbanks in the downtown area.
Correct.
Because we do that 3 times, well,
right.
On a reasonable winter, we'll do it just before Christmas, and then we'll do it again in February.
Correct.
But there is the potential in a heavy winter to do it 3 times.
Sure.
So that's a portion of that area.
Right.
plus the snowbanks that we cut, say, on John Street, because John Street's a very narrow road. We have to stay on top of it. There are others like Northern Avenue.
Sure.
As the roads get narrow, we try and
Sure.
stick to the mains and collectors.
Right.
Residential areas, we only do them when we have to.
Sure.
And if the snowbanks become, as you say, calls come in for safety or whatever, we'll try and attend to them.
Okay, that's, I guess, where I want to go just for now, at the moment, Mr. Mayor, if I can, just to be clear in the public that we don't set off an alarm that all of a sudden now, I think of Ward 2, Pine Street, Major Corridor, Plymouth Street, Major Corridor, you're still going to be looking at safety. Obviously, if someone's in a driveway on a major artery, it's a little bit different than on Queen Street when you have to climb over a snowbank and get into your business or your store, but it's not traffic moving back and forth as you're trying to egress or enter or exit. So I just want to be clear on that.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor
Safety will still be
Myers,
considered.
keep in mind that our snow removal budget is $1,155,000.
That's where I was gonna go
I'm taking
next.
approximately 100,000, 97,000.
Right.
So yes.
Yes.
We'll still be doing snow removal. But again, there's the potential that we may not go to the third time to the downtown
Obviously,
area,
yeah.
or we may not go to some residential areas because we have to control this budget.
Right. And I totally support that approach. I want to be clear that safety will still be obviously well considered, so thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay, the comments I wanted to go back to here, if I could, Mr. Mayor, are around a couple of other items.
Are there questions, Councillor Myers, or just comments?
Excuse me, questions, sorry, on these, this division. On page 18, the environmental initiatives, there's an increase in the 2017 of $10,000 for materials and supplies. And I'm wondering, I believe the CFO might be able to answer that, but perhaps prefer that it's the Director of Engineering, because I already checked with her on it before the meeting. I'm just trying to understand what would be a jump of $10,000 for materials and supplies with environmental initiatives through you, Mr. Mayor. So should it be Director of Engineering, Mr. Elliott? Or CFO? CFO?
I can answer it. Shelley can add something if I mess up here. Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, the $10,000 addition there is we've been looking for many years for a budget to allow us to clean up environmental spills. That we get a phone call that there's an environmental problem in Fort Creek, for example. We have no one to blame. We have to go and clean it up immediately. Those prices range. I think there's been a year or two when we haven't had any calls at all. Another year we'll have $35,000 of work. So that's what that $10,000 item is in that contract.
But that's a new item, right, through you, Mr. Mayor?
It is a new item, yes.
So we've been managing it for a number of years just through how?
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, we call finance up and say, where can we find money for this? And they find us money.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Sorry. You call who?
We call the finance.
Oh, finance.
We call the treasurer.
They essentially grab it from wherever they can to fix the environmental disaster. So now they're wanting to
budget accordingly. Sure.
accordingly.
And this is part of the overall movement that we're trying to get to, period, in our budgeting, is to be realistic in what we're budgeting. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Page 19, building services. It might be a similar type of answer. There's an increase of $5,000 for materials and supplies. That's just in building services. So again, is there some increase that we're aware of in our supplies, or is that just, again, we're trying to be more appropriate in how we're budgeting? Is that Mr.
Mr. Mayor, I'll prefer that to Don Elliott.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, that is one question I did not ask. I don't know exactly what that item is. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I mean, I guess as I'm thinking of the whole budget, it sounds like $5,000 isn't very much, but I'm thinking of, we're going to get later on to supplemental and things like our FCM membership at 11. I mean, if we can find offsetting funds, that's going to make that part easier. And I guess I'm just trying to understand what would be so big an increase from one year over another in our building services supplies. I hesitate to say it's toilet paper or cleaning your soap or something like that, but obviously $5,000 is a fair amount. I think that the CFO is going to answer, Mr. Mayor.
Do you have an answer for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, it is for increases in telephone costs for the Civic Centre operations as a whole. Again, we have a very old telephone system, and the maintenance is getting beyond what we can afford in our budget.
Okay, thank you. And then page 22, that was sort of a bigger one, the sewage disposal system. It's a jump from 30,000 to 50, so it's an increase of $20,000 for materials and supplies. Again, this materials and supplies category, is there some new legislative piece there or something through you, Mr. Mayor, probably to our Director of Engineering again? Or?
Mr. Elliott, do you?
Sewage disposal system, page 22.
Which line item in it? I'm sorry?
Page 22, sewage disposal system.
Through you, Councillor Myers, I could answer that question for you. That is for, under sewage disposal system, that is for also the telephone. So that could have something to do with our SCADA system. And that's what those dollars are for. So probably upgrades or continued improvements to the SCADA system, I would think.
Sorry, to the which system?
SCADA system. That's a system that reads all our sewer systems throughout
Monitoring.
the city and monitors them, monitors the plants.
Good. Thank you very much. Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor, on this division.
We have Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Councillor Krampotic.
Thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and to Mr. Girardi. I guess my question is regarding, I'm concerned about road repair and going forward with any kind of a reduction whatsoever. And I'm concerned, especially I know in Ward 6, I get quite a few calls regarding the potholes. There's no doubt about that. But I guess my question is, with a reduction in service, will they be impacted? And I'd also like to know, over the past decade or so, how much increased road maintenance locally for area roads. Like, I understand that they've been increased to about 59K around there for the past decade or so. Is that correct?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, the city of Sault Ste. Marie may not have grown in numbers, but it has grown in kilometers. Yes, we have 59 more kilometers of road, and our complement hasn't increased since 1990. So we've been able to achieve that through, of course, through some technology and efficiencies.
So with road repair and as far as pothole repair and items like that, do you expect that that is going to be impacted?
Well, certainly when you're removing a complement, two bodies from your complement, it's going to affect many different areas. Specifically, I listed the 3 areas that would affect directly, but indirectly, remember every FTE that we have has to support the opportunity of when you might have someone off sick or off on some type of medical leave. So the fewer bodies that or fewer FTEs that I have on site certainly could affect the operations that way.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question, and I'm not sure if it would go to Mr. Girardi or Susan Hamilton Beach, but PWT has a complement of 222 employees, am I correct? 222 employees?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, you are correct.
Okay, are those all unionized employees?
That includes both union and non-union.
Total complement, eh?
Yes.
And you wouldn't have an idea what the percentage difference is between the union and the non-unionized complement of the 222, eh?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, I don't have that.
Okay. I'd like to get that information at one time. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Mano isn't in the room, so he doesn't get to ask questions. He's coming off my list. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thanks to staff. You know, over the last couple of years, you've made noticeable cuts, and I don't want that to be lost. It certainly isn't lost on me, and I appreciate it. I know they're difficult decisions, but these are difficult budgets. My question, I think, I want to direct this question to Mr. Nero, I believe, and it relates to the overall department, and when it comes to benefits, I see close to a 5% increase in benefits year over year. I'm just wondering if you can explain what's baked into that. It seems a little high. I'm assuming or I'm guessing it has something to do with recent legislation, or what could you tell me about that? It just seems a little high.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, not having seen that specific data, I can only surmise, Councillor Christian, and I would imagine that it's strictly utilization. As our demographics, our population ages, they access more of the benefits that they seem to believe that they need.
Okay.
So certainly being an ASO employer where we pay dollar for dollar plus the admin charge, it would be attributed to higher usage for whatever reason, but I can certainly dwell more into what that higher usage is.
And that's fine. I thought it might have had something, I thought maybe we baked in some numbers from recent, because you've got Public Works here at 5.6% increase year over year. So that could be a measure of the aging demographic of the workforce.
Yeah, it could be a number of things. Could be a longer type of workplace injury or non-occupational illness that drives up some of the benefit utilization provisions that we have.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That's fair. Question I'd like to ask to Mr. Elliott, I think, if I may. I just want to be clear on connecting links. How many kilometers of connecting links do we have in Sault Ste. Marie, connecting links roads?
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, we have 24.5 kilometers, just under 25K.
Okay, and because they're connecting links, do we get any funding from the province to maintain those roads in the winter?
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, no, there's no funding for maintenance or line painting or sweeping or winter control. The Connecting Link program is for reconstruction or capital works resurfacing only.
So we don't have a bypass, so we're essentially being somewhat penalized because we've got trans-provincial traffic going through our community, and we're not being subsidized, or they're not helping us in maintaining the roads that trans-provincial traffic is using.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, that's correct. We don't get funding for any maintenance, just capital.
Sudbury, Thunder Bay, they have bypasses and they get support for those snow removal services.
Yes, in Thunder Bay and Sudbury's example, they actually have highways. Highway 17 goes through the city limits, right, and those highways are completely 100% maintained by MTO, including maintenance.
Seems like there's something wrong there. Thank you very much.
That's it, Councillor Christian? Thank you. Do we have any other questions for this particular discussion here? So we'll move along. Mr. Clerk, what do you think?
Mr. Acting Mayor, members of council, we can now move to the legal department presentation.
Ms. Kenny? As soon as you get a microphone. Those are always hard to find, microphones.
Sorry. Sure.
Just move the mic closer to you there, Ms. Kenny.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Acting Mayor and members of council. It's my pleasure to present the Legal Department's 2017 projected budget tonight. The Legal Department is comprised of legal administration, or what we call the Legal Department proper, and the Provincial Offences Division. Under the Legal Department, there's myself as the City Solicitor, and I work hand in glove with Melanie Borowitz-Sibanek, who's Senior Litigation Counsel and the head of the Provincial Offences Division. We have a solicitor-prosecutor, a bilingual, I'm pleased to say, solicitor-prosecutor Jeff King, who's doing an outstanding job for us in terms of POA prosecutions. We're delighted this year also to welcome our articling student, Megan Duchuk, who's keeping us on our A game. She's very bright young woman and doing a fantastic job getting her fingers in every pie that we have going. Provincial offenses, some contracts, some bylaw drafting, just doing an outstanding job for us. Our office is managed through Ursulina Nacarado, who's would be here this evening, but she is ill. Under our Provincial Offences Division, the court is managed by Nicole Grisdale. Nicole comes to us with lots of experience from the City of Windsor and continues to bring innovative new ideas to the Provincial Offences Court, which we're really pleased with the way Nicole is running things. We also have a bilingual court reporter, which makes things a lot easier for us. We're not farming out French court reporting, 3 admin staff, and 1 clerical support for our prosecutor. I just wanted to provide a little overview about the the duties that the legal department and the provincial offences division undertakes, largely because we're so delighted and grateful, really, that City Council trusted us with a pretty significant budget increase last year, allowed us to hire a risk manager, and has really changed how we're doing our operations. Sort of a 3 to 5 year vision that we had in terms of improving service, making the legal department more efficient, and we've just started to see those kind of savings because we've welcomed Adam Shire to our team. Adam's our risk manager. He comes to us with more than 20 years insurance experience, which really gives us an insider's edge. And if you've had the misfortune of going through a bid for an insurance contract, it's extremely tedious. It is in your personal life. For the municipality, it's even more so. So we have Adam's expertise, and we're just delighted to have it. In terms of the work that the legal department provides, of course, we provide legal advice and opinions to council and to all the other departments. We do all the contracts, leases, licenses of occupation. We're also in charge of city-owned land. We buy and sell property as council sees with some regularity. We have carriage over all freedom of information requests, and freedom of information is an area that does generate a bit of revenue for us, but it is extremely tedious. And since my tenure with the city, I've seen it just grow exponentially. It's an area where people really perhaps didn't have the knowledge that you could access documents through freedom of information. People really know about it now and are really taking advantage of it, which is great because it's a freer flow of information, but it does create a lot more work. We also, of course, run the court, and we're prosecuting through our provincial offences court. We represent the city before various tribunals, including the Human Rights Tribunal of the Ontario Municipal Board and all levels of court. I can just touch briefly on the insurance. We continue to be insured by Jardine Lloyd Thompson. Our insurance premium is about the same as it was last year, which is about $1.3 million, and our deductible is now $75,000 for most claims. It's slightly lower for auto claims, of course. It's part of a 3-year contract that we have with Jardine for insurance that's coming up in the coming year. And you're going to see, again, I expect a much more seasoned response to that bid for insurance because we have a team who's going to help us in terms of the RFP and actually going through the bids that we receive, which is a very complicated process. And just touching again on the duties that are provided to the provincial offences court. Since 2001, municipalities have had carriage of provincial offences administration and prosecution. So we run a court here. We also run a court in Wawa. We send our prosecutor and the court reporter to handle those matters. Provincial offences matters are mostly the bread and butter is highway traffic, but there's also dog owner liability, liquor license, compulsory automobile, all the city bylaws that are prosecuted in the provincial offences court. Jeff King, who I mentioned, is our bilingual prosecutor. That has saved us a lot of money because previously we would farm out French prosecuting. You're entitled in Ontario to have a trial in either official language. Well, Jeff can do it in both, which is better for the city. And he's got about a 95% conviction rate. So we're delighted with what Jeff is bringing in. Of course, those convictions mean sentences, and sentences means fines. And then we bounce back to Nicole, who is very active in trying to get a very aggressive collection approach. We've farmed out collections now to OS collection agency, and that was through an RFP process. And I was just talking to Nicole this morning about how that's coming along, and we're really delighted with what they're generating in terms of fine collection. But more importantly, they've gone back to archaic fines that before were considered not worth chasing, and these guys are taking a very aggressive approach to that. I think we had a slide that just had sort of where the budget is, and it's very similar to what we had last year. In fact, I'm able to show a reduction in our budget this year of about $35,000, and mostly that's because we're doing more in-house work, and I think you're going to see that with the trend continuing because we are really taking control over claims. That's insurance, and that's our vision was that from the inception of a claim to the very end, whether that be at court or at settlement, that we're handling more and more of that in-house, the adjusting more in-house, settlements more in-house, and Melanie is just excited at the prospect of litigating rather than farming. She is. She really is. That's her background, and she's looking forward to that. So I just have one final slide. Also, some of the reduction that we were able to realize was through the reduction of one summer student, and I feel compelled to tell council that it was a very easy stroke of the pen for me to reduce one summer student. But I want to say I'm in a unique position because I can provide young students, young law students, with an opportunity to run a trial from beginning to end because we have our provincial offences court. And it's a very fantastic experience for them because they can see if they like litigating or not, which is not liking litigation is as important as liking it, and they really get that opportunity. And they go on to become lawyers in our community. Some of them might even sit on city council someday.
We don't need more of those, Nuala.
So I just want to stress that it looks like an easy cut for me to cut one of my students, but they are really invaluable to us. They do a fantastic job, but also it's a great experience for them to have our court. And I feel almost a professional obligation to provide that experience to young law students. That said, I'm happy I'm staff tonight, not city council. I know you have tough decisions to make, and I'm delighted that we were able to come in a little bit under this year.
Any questions for the city solicitor? Start with Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to also couch it with a comment, and I know we'll have comments later, but I promise I won't repeat it later. But I just want to thank Nuala and her team because this is a small department, but they've had tremendous change in their department since we sat here this time last year, and just really great compliments to you, Nuala, and I know you would give it to your team members, but you've done a great job for us, and I think, certainly for myself, I know how many times I'm in touch with you guys looking for advice and help, and Jeff has been excellent, even though he doesn't always have the outcome that I would like to have. He's the expert, I'm not. So I really appreciate it, and please pass on to all your staff that aren't here tonight. Just really a great appreciation for city councillors. We really need that expertise, and thank you for that. My one question is just a very straightforward. I'm sure you're going to be able to answer it quite easily. On page 3 of your budget slides, there's $4,000 for maintenance and repairs, and I simply just have to, I'm trying to think of what are the maintenance and repairs within the legal department. Is it going to be telephone system? I don't know, but probably. What might that be through you, Mr. Mayor?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Myers, those actually are maintenance and repairs that we have for city-owned properties that we have to maintain, yes.
Okay. And then on that note, just the one other was around the leases and rents. What would those be? Again, they'd be related to city properties that we own, or?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers, we have licenses of occupation, we've got encroachment agreements, we charge people if they're on our land for various reasons. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks again for your work.
Any other questions for the city solicitor? Seeing none, we can move on in our agenda. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as there had been an extensive report at an earlier meeting on fire services, it was felt that there didn't need to be a presentation per se. However, Chief Fiola is here to answer any questions you may have on the budget materials that are in your binder.
Okay, so questions for Chief Fiola. Councillor Fata.
This is something that we already touched on, and I guess I just want to make reference to it in terms of the costs applied to it. I think in what you mentioned to us, when the 24-hour shift begins, which I assume have already begun?
They have not.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Fata, no, they have not. They're still in working on the arbitration award to implement that facet of the contract.
But somewhere during the discussion, you mentioned to me or to us through experiences elsewhere that absenteeism goes up when they introduce 24-hour shifts. Is that what was stated?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Fata, that has been the experience on some occasions. Part of what we're negotiating and implementing the arbitration award is to have clear key indicators on sick leave. So we'll be monitoring that like we do now, but as it applies to the 24-hour shift.
Mm-hmm. If I could make reference to a point that was raised by Mr. Nero, he made reference to absenteeism looking over a 4-year period, that it costs the city somewhere between $1.2, $1.5 million. So he made reference to, I believe he made reference to the fire services, if he would like to comment. I just want to see the comment that was made during that discussion regarding that cost of absenteeism referenced the 24-hour shift, I believe.
How does this impact this budget,
I
Councillor
think
Fata?
it impacts it because
this
is going to happen in 2017.
Well, let's drive to that. Do you expect to implement the 24-hour shift in 2017?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor, at this point, we thought we had a deal, but we're going back to the arbitration board, so I don't know the timelines, how long that could take. It could take another year.
Okay, so but we right now, so that's a matter that's still kind of being dealt with between the administration and the union, so we should probably really minimize our discussion on it. And we really can't give any concrete sense of absenteeism, but in any event, you're not budgeting for absenteeism, so it doesn't actually affect the 2017 budget. So I think, Councillor Fata, because these matters aren't settled as between administration and the union, I don't think we should go too far down this road.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to the fire chief, regarding the projected budget for 2017 and the current budget of 2016, and I'm hoping my calculations are correct, but there's a difference in salary about 2.1, and then in benefits it's over 600,000. Is that correct? And maybe you can explain why the difference.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Are you looking at the main summary, budget summary?
Yes, looking at the budget summary.
Most of that, the increase is due to the DSAB, the changeover from, we've basically increased the ambulance complement by 1/3. So the numbers you're seeing there are not the fire numbers; they're offset by the DSAB numbers.
So to answer his question, the increase in salaries and benefits are all on the EMS side?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, yes, and that was brought in last year's budget. This is a continuation of the changes that were implemented for 2016. The only change on this is the funding method was done through the DSAB reserves. For 2017, they'll be coming from the province for the 50-50 split. Bit of confusion on the numbers. The numbers have not changed. The funding method has.
So that's why the revenue side was up too.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor, that's correct.
Are there any, in the increase in the salaries and benefits, to Councillor Bruni's question, is it solely EMS or is it any of the other fire side positions that you're hiring?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Bruni, on the salary side, it refers to the it's basically revenue neutral. We're moving it from fire to the DSAB. Now it's showing on the DSAB side, so the revenue from DSAB is increased based on the changeover from fire. And on the benefit side, as was previously mentioned, that's dealing with the WSIB presumptive illness, both for fire and EMS.
That's the 683 increase? 683,000?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, yes.
I'm still a bit confused here. I mean, okay. So the increase to the 2017 budget is strictly due to the EMS in the city? Because the complement has increased from 31 to 39. Correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the actual increase overall will be to 50 on the DSAB side from 2016.
Wow. I'm just, all due respect, sir, Chief, I'm just going by what's presented to me. And I didn't see that number that came up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Councillor Bruni. This budget here is a hybrid of the EMS budget and the fire budget. The fire budget is complete. The DSAB budget, based on DSAB has not prepared their budget for 2017, has not been confirmed yet. So we're moving based on last year's numbers, which are 2016. If we remember, we did the half levy, half reserve split last year to fund the increase to the EMS service pending the 2017 funding from the province.
But it breaks down in the following budgets. Like, if you look at the package, each one of the sub-budgets in the Chief's department has, you have an increase in prevention, you have an increase in support, you have an increase in EMS. So it's not simply the EMS increase that's showing in your global budget, it's the increase in all of your sub-departments. With the exception of suppression, which you have a decrease in.
Right. The numbers have changed within the division, but the overall number has not changed. We've had a decrease of 8 on the fire side and an increase of the equivalency of 50-50 of 8 on the EMS side and 4 on the fire side as a reallocation from suppression.
Councillor Bruni, do you need more clarity?
Well, for the Garden River EMS, wages and benefits, there's an increase of 285. We already have that in operation, right, from the past. So I'm just wondering, is it because of more manpower going there?
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor, Garden River is 100% funded by the province.
Right.
So they at the Garden River, even though it's a standalone station, 100% funded through the province. It fits into the overall system, so there is an increase in part-time hours allocated to the Garden River.
Okay, because in the report I was looking at, the part-time hours have been reduced. So, yeah.
Just see me, I'll just scroll down to the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
That's no cost to the city of Sault Ste. Marie taxpayers, though, Councillor Bruni.
Yes, it's 100% funded by the province through the and flow through money from the feds.
Yeah. So what's the concern there?
Just 1 second, Mayor.
Well, Councillor Bruni is looking. Maybe I can ask you a question, Chief. I was looking at the community emergency management, and through the realignment, we authorized us going from 1 employee to 2 employees. But our salary and benefits for 1 employee was just under $90,000, and our salary and benefits for 2 employees, $230,000. Why the substantial increase?
Mr. Mayor, the previous emergency management was simply a community emergency management coordinator, one function. Part of the realignment allowed for a more substantive, deeper, broader view of emergency management. So those positions, the second position created, and the existing position went through a job reevaluation, and that would explain for the increase.
So we have significantly more resources invested in emergency management. So what does that mean? 1,000 on to something that we're don't understand. What do we do?
The original rate had to fill out certain forms, had to do very minimal under the Civil Protection Emergency Management Act. We've moved to a system where, in response to an all hazards approach to mitigate, identify, prepare a host of both man-made and natural disasters. For example, we're on an international border. We have significant concerns both on climate, weather, as well as incidents of the man-made disasters. For example, we had a natural flooding disaster a couple years ago, which we were not well prepared for. Indications are that weather events are going to cause more and more grief to municipality moving forward, and we are not prepared. We didn't have in-house expertise to both plan for that and then mitigate it when it does happen. That's one example of man-made stuff. Sorry, of natural-made disasters. It's becoming a worldwide phenomenon, and we need to make sure we're ahead of the curve so when those things do happen, and they will happen, those 1-in-100-year storms, that we have the expertise in-house to prepare for that.
Councillor Myers, and then I'll go back to Councillor Bruni. I think it's on the same question, Councillor Bruni.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I just actually, again, wanted to say I sit on the emergency management, and that's an excellent point the Chief's just made, because we got a report that showed over, how many years, was that 100 years, Chief? I can't remember, it was a scale, and it just went like this. I was shocked when we saw it. It was 2 meetings ago, I think it was. And I was stunned, and that's what it is. It's the phenomena of natural disasters are going like this. And I thought, oh my gosh. And so this is really important for our community that we are prepared, because it will likely happen.
Councillor Bruni?
I just want to go back to the EMS Garden River. Your fees and user charges have increased by $321,000. So I'm just asking, why such a high increase? Are you doing something different, or is EMS doing something different for the Garden River? That's on page 9 of 9.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. The increase for Garden River is basically, part of that is a catch-up for the full funding. If you remember, we had a day car in Garden River. So the 2017 funding for Garden River, which is 100% paid by the province, part of that was a catch-up for 2015 and 16. Our fiscal year, which is January to December, is different than the provincial fiscal year. So although they fund us in our fiscal year, the catch-up and the changes to the provincial funding runs on their fiscal year.
Okay. The wages and the benefits, your full-time complement is 8. Your part-time hours have been reduced, but your salaries have gone up to $231,000, and your benefits went up $53,000, 34% and 39% respectively. So I guess my question is, why the $231,000 increase if the complement is still the same?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. The complement has stayed the same. This is a catch-up from the ministry based on the funding model that we changed in 2016. We at that point we had a complement of 4. We had 12-hour service 7 days a week. We moved to 24-hour service 7 days a week. This is a catch-up to that, and then the number there will be the number moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking at community emergency management. Chief, I appreciate the explanation of what the community emergency management position is. I'm just trying to understand why there's a need for 2. I mean, I'm sure they're well worth the salary, but that is a lot of money. Why? I'm trying to understand why we need 2. Maybe you could just explain the interaction between the 2, the roles of the 2, so I can better understand it. Because usually when I think of a coordinator or somebody organizing it, it's usually one person.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. The mandate of emergency management is multitasking, multi-focus. So we have the new position that was created was a planning and research officer. That person's initial responsibility is to identify trends, identify equipment, identify best practices, in conjunction with the manager in charge, is then to develop the programs. The manager liaises with senior levels of government, non-government organizations to bring back to that discussion regulatory, make the connections in the field, and between the 2 of them, they develop the program, and they both now take the program out to the community. It's just a workload issue. There's a workload both on time and workload based on responsibilities.
Fine.
Any other questions on, go ahead, Councillor Fada.
One question that we touched on before in regards to the operating budget for the support staff. Can you remind us if, when it comes to the 369, whether anybody outside of firefighters is receiving that 369?
So, Councillor Fada, again, you're asking questions that relate to the Sault Ste. Marie Professional Firefighters Association and administration who are currently in arbitration. You're aware that the firefighters get 369. You're also aware.
I wasn't referring to them, though. I'm referring to the non-firefighters staff. That's part of this budget here, operating budget for support staff. I'm looking at that figure of $402,539 for 4 staff.
Yeah, as a result.
My question relates to that particular chart.
Sure, and we were told, I believe Councillor Mr. Nero can step up to the microphone. We were told as a result of a recent arbitration award that that was affected across the department. But again, that's still something that's being discussed as between administration and the Sault Ste. Marie Professional Firefighters Association. So I think we have to be careful, how much we talk about it. Mr. Nero, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Fada. It was expanded during the last interest arbitration award. I'm not prepared to say any more than that, but it was expanded.
Okay, anything else for the fire chief? Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this brings us to the deliberation phase of the budget. The CFO treasurer has a couple of slides. You've been provided them in hard copy at your desk, but she will be putting them up on the screens, and she will go through them further at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before we begin, I just want to reiterate what the city solicitor has said about the value of our summer students. Departments provide a real life experience, whether it's in legal, accounting, engineering, or even on the tools. I think it's an important investment in our youth and also in our community's future. So I just wanted to, again, just reiterate what she has said. Now to move on, the table that you're seeing above is going to be updated in real time as we go through our deliberations. The top line reflects the preliminary budget as was presented to Council on November 21st. The adjustments that have been made to reach 5.63 from 6.63 are also shown. There's only 3 adjustments. One was the fire complement. That was adjusted for some retirements that were previously not accounted. The contingency, which covers such items as assessment appeals, unresolved contractual obligations, severances, etc., has been adjusted down by $750,000 as we revisited our estimates. The impact annual fee, which was received after the preliminary budget was released, and it has been adjusted also for $20,000, and that's up, not down. So now our maintaining services has been adjusted down by 1% to 2.02 levy increase. This table, as I said, is going to be adjusted as Council deliberates and approves adjustments, so you can kind of see where our levy is at any point in time. Before we begin the deliberations, I want to show Council the current supplementary requests and staff's proposed options to address decreasing the impact of the 2.24% levy increase relating to 2016's tax reprieve. This slide reflects all of the supplementary requests, whether they're one-time or ongoing costs that have been submitted for this year's budget. The total amount of both would account for $813,600 additions to the levy if all of them were approved. Staff is not recommending any additions to the levy, but can propose a reallocation for 2017 until 2019 within the current budget for the downtown development project, which is a key element of the corporate strategic plan. Did you want to discuss the supplementaries before we move on, Mr. Mayor?
So why don't we give council a chance to take a look at the supplementaries and ask questions about the supplementaries, and then we should, I think, go back to you explaining kind of how we got to 5.63, and then we can Oh, sorry, 5.6, you already did that. Your other slide. Yeah. So let's just stay on the supplementaries for a second. We'll have everybody take a look at them, familiarize yourself with them. We can ask any questions about them. And then we'll move on and we'll go back to the treasurer to talk about where we're at as far as the levy increase goes. Where is this back? Where's the slide? This one here? Well, I'm asking the clerk that because I thought it was in here and I can't. I can't find it on mine. See a full budget presentation?
No, it's there.
Okay, so maybe if the treasurer can take us through the, how we go from 5.63 to 4.24, and then we can discuss the supplementary. Yes.
The 4.24, that's not going to have any of the supplementaries in it.
No, no.
But isn't it important to hear that there's some means of addressing some of the supplementaries that isn't going to impact levy?
We'll come back to the supplementary, and if anybody's interested in including a supplementary, we can talk about different ways to address it. But
okay.
I think we want to see how we get
Got
to
it.
the end result.
Thank you.
The options being presented will reduce the levy increase from 5.63% to 4.24%, with addition decreases totaling of almost $1.5 million. In addition to the preliminary budget decrease of salary reflected in the salaries and benefits, the original $80,000 decrease from 2016, we also have an organizational realignment option, which will see an additional reduction to salaries and benefits of $580,985. Next, staff is also presenting the option of closing the household hazardous waste and landfill during the winter, saving an additional $24,700. As was told by our Commissioner of Public Works and Engineering, currently the landfill is open one Saturday per month in the winter. The household hazardous waste has not been open actually at all until projected this winter with the relocation to the landfill. So even though we would be closing it on the proposed Saturday in the winter, there's still an increase in service in that it'll be open Monday to Friday during the winter where it was closed all winter before. The other option, permanently remove the fountain, which is now beyond its useful life, and would save an additional $23,000 in annual maintenance costs. And finally, a temporary reduction to the miscellaneous construction resurfacing budget equal to $820,000 is another option. Also note that there is still $1 million in resurfacing that still remains in the capital budget. Just to clarify, the close of the household hazardous waste, it's household hazardous waste and landfill in the winter. Both operations.
On Saturday only.
On the Saturday in the winter. Council can now begin budget deliberations. I'll turn it back over to the mayor and clerk. And if there's any questions of staff on each of the options, I'm sure they can answer them.
Okay, so Mr. Girardi has some comments here.
Through Mr. Mayor to council, just for clarification, there's one note that was just incorrect, and it might have been some earlier notes. We've made a lot of changes over time, but the household hazardous waste site will be closed completely. That's not open Monday to Friday, not open on the Saturdays. Okay, my apologies to
for which months?
CFO.
For which months?
Just for the winter months, as it was before. Starting, well, we would have done it. We can start it just as soon as this is done, as soon as we have a decision here.
And this isn't a service that we previously offered, is that
No, it was a service that normally closed through the winter months. It usually closed at the end of October. Now we're a little delayed, but the savings is still going to be, on this case here, $24,700. That's with closing landfill on Saturdays during the winter and closing the household hazardous waste site, which is located there for the entire winter, as it was every other year.
Okay. So we'll start with questions on the supplemental items. So we'll go with Councillor Myers, then Councillor Bruni.
Okay, so just with what you were just talking about here, does it have to be that we close it on the Saturday for the landfill? Could we not close it on a Monday and have it open on a Saturday? The reason I'm saying that is Saturday is the day when a lot of people are doing their business such that they would come out to use the landfill, and I'd be more interested in seeing the user days. I mean, to me, Saturday is one of the most popular days to use a landfill. I don't know that, I'm just guessing that.
Susan has been looking into this a little bit because there might have been other requests like similar to this one, so I'll have her answer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. In fact, our operations Monday through Friday are almost mandatory right now because of the sludge delivery. So we need the waste to balance the sludge. So closing any weekday is really not in the cards at this point in time. Our Saturday operation for the last 3 years has not, the revenue hasn't offset the cost. So in sheer numbers alone, we have not had the customers there.
Okay, remind me, I know I should know it, but I don't. What are the hours of the operation of the landfill during the week?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, it's 8:30 to 4:30.
Okay, so bottom line is for a working person, they're not going to have access to the landfill. That's the bottom line. Not that I'm one, I'm retired, I could go anytime, but I mean, that's my concern, is that when we're looking at service adjustments, which I totally agree we should make the adjustment, but I'd like to make it that we can still provide the service to the community, and I'm challenged to think that 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday, gives people an option of using our landfill.
Through you, Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, it definitely takes, it's a planned effort. You would have to arrange either through lunches or early in the day to get there, or at the end of your day.
So there's no way we could even adjust those hours, that say it was 10 until 6?
Through you, Mr. Mayor to Councillor Myers, those hours were in fact adjusted last year. It is a difficult thing to operate a facility 6 days a week with a 5-day operation. So it's
no, I agree with the 5
optimized.
days, but I'm just saying, could the hours in those 5 days be such that they can still capture people who are working until 4:30 and 5 o'clock at night? It's just something to ask. Is that even possible to be considered if council goes in this direction?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. Generally, our collection crews, again, are on the road by 7:30, so it really does become a staffing nightmare to have that day extended. So all the savings which we were in fact seeing because of the reduced hours, we'd be back on the table.
Okay, thank you. The other one then, Mr. Mayor, on these items is looking at the supplementary, the $200,000 for the downtown. Do we have any understanding as to how that could be funded where it wouldn't impact levy? Again, I'll go back to Mr. Vera's presentation with the community services. Who would answer that?
So right now, we're focusing, Councillor, we're going to get to the supplementals. We're focusing on these.
Just this?
Yeah,
Okay.
just the items that relate to the decreases.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so Councillor Bruni?
Yes. To Ms. Susan Hamilton Beach, regarding the closure Saturdays of winter months, how many months is this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we're looking at 5 months.
5 months, so you're looking at approximate, so this 24/7 is revenue that we're losing from the landfill site, or is this wages?
Correct, wages.
Just wages, so we're losing revenue.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, that's not the difference between the cost and the revenue. That's, our revenue is handled in a separate column, but that is what it would cost us to operate both those facilities for those Saturdays throughout the winter months.
So approximately $5,000 a month.
Correct.
Yeah. I would like to have at least a report on this, like what is our revenue on Saturdays? Pardon? I don't know what the revenue is, and all due respect, you did say revenue has been going down, decreasing. I would like to see that on paper before I would be able to vote on this.
Do we have any information available to us today that relates to the usage on Saturdays? Is the usage on Saturdays declining of the landfill?
Yes, 4 years ago, Mr. Mayor, we did see it was a balance and if not a bit more of a profit. At this point in time, for the last 3 years, it's been decreasing.
What do we attribute that to? Why is it that people are using the landfill less on Saturdays than they used to?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say it's a diversion of the waste itself through our many options, through our recycling, et cetera. Again, the landfill is open the other 5 days of the week.
So do we have any answers for Councilor Bruni with respect to what kind of revenues generated at the landfill on those?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to the council, I'd like to bring up Monty Pinder, the manager of landfill. He'll be able to give us some numbers related to the operational costs as opposed to the revenue that we're collecting.
Welcome to council, Mr. Pinder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On average, the landfill during the winter months, it depends on the number of paying customers or residents. Commercial vehicles that go through the landfill are basically our own refuse trucks on Saturdays. So basically there's no revenue from commercial. So our residential vehicles go between 100 to 200 vehicles on a Saturday. And the past 3 years it's been around 100, 120 vehicles at $10 a vehicle. So we're only generating $1,100 to $2,000 a Saturday. And it's costing us about $4,000 to operate with equipment and fuel.
So it's costing us about $2,000 per Saturday to operate it.
Correct.
Yeah.
$2,000, but you said $5,000. It costs you $5,000 a month.
She was including the household waste.
Well, household waste, there's no cost. Is there?
If we were to stay open, there is a cost because we have to.
If you stay open, there's a cost.
Correct.
Okay, Councilor Bruni?
Not really, but yeah.
No, but you have the information you were looking for.
I have the information.
Councilor Mano?
Thank you to Ms. Hamilton Beach. Just to sort of follow up on the concerns raised by Councillor Myers and Councillor Bruni, would an option exist, or has it been looked at, to say reduce the hours? Actually, first off, what are our hours on a Saturday?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, as well as the weekdays, it's 8:30 to 4:30. Yeah.
So have we ever considered maybe doing like a 2 or a 4-hour session opening on a Saturday and then maybe reducing those hours on another weekday? Or is that right out there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, again, quite a staffing
nightmare.
All right. You're having to schedule individuals all week, and that pool of workers comes from our works division.
Right.
So the scheduling is best certainly for a full day's worth of work.
And we would never want to like close on, let's say, a Wednesday or something and open on a Saturday.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, the sludge arrives those 5 days out of the week.
Okay.
Again, we have 10,000 tons of sludge, which once our biosolids facility is up and running, that's a real obstacle for us. And if it's eliminated, we can start looking at some of these options, but at this point in time, virtually immediately, if we don't have the garbage to mix with that, we're in an odor complaint situation.
Okay, just spitballing. One other question, not on this point, but I had another question with respect to this.
If it's on this topic, if it doesn't have to be on this topic, but if it's on that list, you're good.
It's on the list. Can somebody help me out with the 433,745, what that means? The Community Development and Enterprise Services, 433,000?
That would be Mr. Ver.
Mr. Ver?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, what makes up that item is attrition, again, not hiring on retirements. It's also postponing the hiring of other positions in the department or foregoing hiring positions.
Thank you. And one further, and I'll ask for just input from both Mr. Girardi and Mr. Elliott on this. The lion's share of the cut that we see here is the $820,000 for miscellaneous road resurfacing or construction resurfacing. And then, of course, it's noted as being reinstated in 2017. Help me out. What are we losing more specifically?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, I guess I should point out, I believe that's a typo. It will be reinstated in 2018.
2018, yeah, sorry.
But that's the major portion of the miscellaneous construction account that we use for resurfacing every year. And that also includes the surface treatment, the 300,000 or so that we do for, it's the tar and chip that we do on some of the rural roads. So it's the bulk of what we do for resurfacing. That's the base funding for resurfacing each year. There is some resurfacing money in capital when we have the ability to apply some to capital or to resurfacing from the capital budget, but this is your base resurfacing.
So just as a simple example, if I give you or Mr. Girardi a call up in the spring because someone's road has been torn up by the winter, which happens regularly,
they're going to have less money to do it.
and you don't have the money to do it, this person's road is going to wait full of potholes until that money comes back in, and then hopefully we can cover whatever we missed in that 17 year.
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, yes, or I refer you to Public Works for more maintenance, which they love.
And Mr. Girardi would say what to me?
Yeah, exactly. Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Romano, as I said earlier in my presentation, you shift burden. So what's happening in this situation is if we're not doing the resurfacing on a certain road, then the burden shifted over to Public Works to go there and do those potholes. So will the potholes be fixed? We'll certainly do our best to certainly patch the potholes. But if a road is in extremely poor condition and you're counting on it getting done, no, that option isn't there. And again, as Don and I had chatted earlier today, he had mentioned that this is something that we do come spring, because if you asked him today what roads would be included in that, he wouldn't be able to tell you. This is almost like our emergency ward or triage, as he said earlier today. When we come to spring and a road has completely disintegrated for some reason, due to water, due to ice, due to frost, due to shifting, that's where we pull that money. That option won't be there.
Just one moment.
So, which is why, Councillor Romano and for council, which is why the staff is giving you these options, but they're not recommending these options, but they're giving you these options. We're going to move on, Councillor Romano. If we have a long list here.
Mr. Mayor, just have one other.
Please, just
follow up. So to Mr. Elliott again, we've discussed some roads specifically in Ward 6 that currently only have gravel roads, not any type of asphalt surfacing. Those are Deshane Drive, Pine Shores Drive, and Red Pine Drive. And I we've had some issues with respect specifically Red Pine that we're looking at resolving, but the road resurfacing would not be able to occur in 27 or 18 if we got rid of this budget item. Is that a fair comment?
it wasn't scheduled, those roads weren't scheduled to be surfaced in 2017 in any event, were they, Mr. Elliott?
No, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Romano, they would be considered with all the other needs for surface treatment. There has been a long-term desire in the Engineering Division and Public Works to convert. We have a very small inventory of gravel roads, and they're a maintenance headache. So it's been on our wish list for many years to make those roads put surface treatment on them. So they would be evaluated with other needs, though. There's no guarantee that it would be done next year. But if we're not doing any resurfacing or surface treatment, then certainly they wouldn't be.
Thank you.
Councillor Butland?
Yes. On the same point as Councillor Romano, but taking it a bit further, I hope. To Mr. Elliott, resurfacing, reconstruction, is it still 10 times the general cost of reconstruction? Reconstruction is 10 times the cost of keeping a road up with resurfacing over a time period. I haven't worded that well, but I know you know what I mean.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland, it's probably still in that range with the price of oil and asphalt cement these days. It may be a higher percentage than that, but it's in that range. It's a 10 to 15% probably to resurface a road, as opposed to fully reconstruct the road base and the services underneath it.
Thank you. And that's held true. And we have such a deficit in roadways, not only us, but right across the province. What is the deficit from time to time? We get a reading, just how many millions we are behind. How many millions are we behind?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Button, I think the road deficit is in the range of 500 or so million, in that range right now. So even with a full capital works reconstruction program, we're getting behind.
And we've expended more in roadways in the last several years than we had done previously. Is that a true statement?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Button, what do you mean by extended?
We've expended more monies in roadways.
Yes, with good grants over the last 10 years or so, we've had some good projects, good size capital works programs, yes.
And there's still 11 million in this budget.
Exactly.
There's still, independent of this, Councillor Button, there's still 11 million in this budget for roads.
Okay, but
Including
I want to
$1 million
make the point about the miscellaneous construction. I think it would be a mistake to end that for a year. Say, well, it's not important this year. We'll put it on the road map next year again. And I would suggest that a good way of financing would be through, if this is significant enough to us, and I think if you ask the general population, they would say, absolutely, you should continue to do this. And long-term debt, it's going to be, I think, 5.5 million next year. Michelle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland. At December 31st, 2017, it's estimated to be 6.4 million, and at the end of this year, it's estimated at 7.7 million in total for our long-term debt.
Okay. I undershot it a bit. But our situation as far as long-term debt is exceedingly low, and I trot out this figure every year. 50 years ago, it was 16 million, and now it's half that. And we've done a whole lot of things in between. And it is trending down ever more dramatically, actually. So if you were going to finance anything, it would be roadways in Sault Ste. Marie. I just put that on the table. And another issue, Mr. Mayor.
One second, Councillor Button.
Sorry.
The treasurer wants to speak to that.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland, I would tend to disagree with you on our roadways, mostly because our roadway allocation is part of our ongoing operating budget. It's not a one-time amount. So as you borrow and borrow to finance your roads, all you're doing is financing your operating budget, which again is something that is not recommended because again, you're just extending out the time frame that you're going to pay. So eventually you're going to get to the position that we were, I'm not sure how long ago, but it was something that my predecessor got council off of, was borrowing for roads, because it's an ongoing maintenance and capital cost. So again, I just want to reiterate the point. It's not prudent to borrow for an item that is operating. And I would recommend, as the treasurer, that the city borrows for more one-time events.
Well, I'm not in a position, obviously. I'd be an unarmed man trying to debate with you on the financial part of it. But on the roadway part of it, I would disagree with you with as much respect as I can muster, of course. May I switch now, gears?
Are you going to ask questions, or are you going to debate with the CFO?
I've given that one up.
Okay, so we're going to, as long as the questions are about the potential reductions that they're putting on for our consideration, yes.
Household hazardous waste, we took how many years to get this place open? Many years. And we closed it every winter because it was too cold. The workers couldn't work in there. There was no heat. Minister of Labor said, no, you can't have people working in there. So it took all this time to get it open, and now say we're going to close it for 5 months. My wife sends me up there regularly with hazardous waste, and I was there last week, and I said, how is business here? 40 or 50 people a day. That's busy. If it doesn't go to the hazardous waste depot, where do you think it goes? It goes in your garbage bag and subsequently ends up in the landfill. So that's an environmental hazard in a lot of ways. And we always talk about snowbanks and that's a safety issue. Hazardous waste is a safety issue. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we have Councillor Nero and then Christian and then Hollingsworth on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Shell, the miscellaneous construction, 820,000. We're saying, I know you're not recommending this, but if council decides to do this, you're telling us to reinstate it next year, or that would be our option next year, obviously, or it could be gone forever.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, staff's intention is to have that reinstated in 2018. And there is a program that's going to be put in place where we will be looking for efficiencies and that will address this and some other items where we need to offset to bring increases back through the budget.
So, but if we can't offset it, this could possibly show up in the preliminary 2018 budget as an impact of 1 year levy reduction of 0.8%, just like the surpluses showed up this year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, you are correct. It is very similar to what we have been doing with the surplus and reserves. But in this instance, what we're going to do is do everything in our power to have it reinstated without adding an additional burden to the levy. And that's going to be part of staff's mandate going forward through the CAO. There is always the risk that things may not materialize and we may have an issue where we can't reinstate it. And council needs to be aware of that risk.
So that provision can't be overcome. There can't be a provision in this year's budget that 820,000 goes in regardless of what happened. That no. Staff would find 820,000 in the overall budget to put back into miscellaneous construction.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, I don't think we can promise that that's happening. We can't promise anything because this year was a prime example of everything that went the wrong way. And a lot of stuff was beyond our control. But that is what we're endeavoring to do. And I'm sure the CAO would have some comments to add to this.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. Just to be clear, what we would be bringing back as a part of the work throughout 2017 is for the 2018 budget. So we would not be able to accomplish the 820,000 in 2017. So we're saying here's a means through which we will start to reduce reliance on surplus. We're not being able to go all the way, but we look at this as being a pause that would be able to take place in 2017 while we work to try and find that $800,000 million in term to be able to offset it when we come back in 2018 for a levy request at that time. So it's not achievable within 2017 outside of using this item, but we're expecting it would be achievable for 2018.
And council has its discretion, obviously. It could implement that fee on an incremental basis. If we wanted to bring that expense back up, you could increase it, over a course of a number of years to some tune. It doesn't have to go on all at once, but I think that the goal of staff would be to find areas, space in the budget between now and 2018 where they can reclaim that without actually having an adverse impact on the levy.
Or if the whole amount isn't in, whatever amount is found, it can go back in 2018. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Councillor Christian and Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your comments about recognizing that these are recommendations and council needs to make the decision. Fully aware of that. I've been asking for this for 6 years, so it's nice to see. The hazardous waste, I hate to dwell on this, but that 24,000 is a net savings?
Through Mr. Mayor.
Like that's cost minus the revenue that we would generate.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. No, it is not. That is strictly the cost.
So the $20,000 in revenue we would make for the 20 weeks that were closed would net this to about $4,000. Is that correct? Say we make about $1,000 on a Saturday. We're closed for 5 months. That's 20 weeks. That's $20,000. we're losing $4,000.
And I will confer, I believe the landfill is only opened one Saturday each of those winter months.
Okay, so, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies.
Yes.
So it's 20,000 it's costing us to keep it open.
Correct.
Okay.
And we would be adding to it this year the cost of the HHW, which has no revenue. There's minimal funding
Right,
for that.
understood.
And which we hadn't done prior to this year.
Yeah,
Correct.
understood. My apologies.
So it's not a
I-
service that our community at this
Yeah.
point would miss.
Okay, so the net cost is $20,000.
Approximately, yes.
Okay, anything else, Councillor Christian, on this?
No, that's it.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. To, I guess it'd be Mayor Larry Girardi, Commissioner Girardi. Just going back to the 820,000, thank you for your explanation. I think it was well explained. So if I understand this correctly, we're just going to take the year 2017 to basically reconfigure this and possibly just to see how we can squeeze this back into potentially the 2018. And if I understand this correctly, it's more like you're saying potholes, if something has to be resurfaced, but it's not going to impact the projects you have already identified or potentially identified for road construction. It's just more of the resurfacing. Is that correct?
We would still be spending our $11 million budget on our roads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good. For clarification for home viewers.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I was hoping to do. Is it on the landfill again, Councillor Bruni?
Yes, it is. You said that it's only open one Saturday a month during the winter?
Correct.
Landfill site?
Mr. Mayor.
Presently?
Presently, for the last many years.
For sure?
Yes, Monday to Friday, but for those 5 months, it's only open one Saturday. So, a month, yes.
Okay, I just want clarification. Thanks.
So that's what would be changed, yeah. You thought it was open every Saturday.
I thought I used it every Saturday. Or it must be the summertime.
Okay, Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Shell, if we approve these recommendations, how does that change going from the 5.63 to the 4.24? What does that do to the $165 per year or $14 a month on the average residential property? Should be able to plug
I
that.
think the CEO, can answer this.
Okay.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. I'm looking to nodding I've had from the CFO treasurer when she gets to that page, but my understanding it's about $111 to $112 on the average household, which works out to about $9.30 per month. So 112 for a year, $9 and.
So we'll have the treasurer, she's tweaking something with her fingers here, so we're gonna go with her.
No, I just want to clarify, it's not the average residential property. One of the things we will be doing this year is giving different comparators because it does cause some confusion. That's on a single-family home, is $112 a month, works out to 4.51% increase. Single-family homes are almost 80% of the residential class. So it just gives a little better
No,
comparator.
112 for the year.
For the whole year. Sorry, for the year, not the month, sorry. Oh my gosh, no.
So on a single-family home,
Yes.
the increase at that rate, Councillor Nero, will be $112 a year.
Correct, and that's on 80% of the residential homes.
That's 80% of our residential taxpayers.
Approximately.
So the other 20% is above that or below that, or is it split 10 above, 10 below?
Funny you should ask that. Actually, I have a tax impact summary, and again, this is on the 4.24% levy increase. Between $0 and $100 will be 38% of the total residential class. Between $100 and $2,
Sorry, I don't think that was clear. So 38% of the residential class will have a tax increase of between $0 and $100 per annum.
yes,
Okay.
per year. And 50% will have an increase per year between $100 to $200. So that accounts for the majority of the residential class as a whole.
Okay, so now we're talking about 4.24, but we're not there yet. So what I wanted to do.
But I had to know if I was going to think
gotcha.
about that.
What I was hoping to do was we have, if Michelle can go to her spreadsheet, that is the live dynamic spreadsheet. So, Council, we don't vote in committee of the whole, but if I can get a sense of whether there's support, we're going to start adjusting the spreadsheet. Councilor Romano, can I have your attention? Okay, so we're trying to make some progress here and get somewhere. So if we have the 2017 operating budget priority list of options that staff gave us. So the first three are Public Works and Engineering, 68.3, Community Development Enterprise Service, 433, 745, Corporate Services, including CEO, Legal, and Mayor's Office, 78,940, for a reduction of 580,985. Now, if we want staff to make that reduction, and if that's agreeable, we can add that to the spreadsheet, and we'll see the effect on the levy. So can I have kind of a sense from council on who's agreeable to those three reductions? Show of hands. Okay, so we have a majority there that would agree to that. So Michelle can add those first three reductions into the spreadsheet.
Right here.
So in these next ones, we're going to do one by one because there was a little more debate about these. So we'll just let Michelle catch up with us. We're not there yet. I think everybody's agreeable to the fountain.
To which one?
Go ahead.
Okay, so council, so the next one is the closing the hazardous waste in landfill on Saturdays in the winter month. Now, is there support on council for doing that? So, like, not nodding hands, if you can put your hand up so I can get a sense of whether there's support. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so there is. So that would be included. Michelle. The permanent removal of the fountain on St. Mary's River, is there support for that? Yeah. Okay. So Michelle, you can include that one too. Now there might be more debate about this one. So if we could maybe have a sense of whether there's support for the reduction to miscellaneous construction. I didn't offer any comments to this when it went around. I'm going to offer them now. We do have a significant roads deficit, and I appreciate that. I have a bit of a hard time with, and staff and I have had this conversation a lot. The roads deficit is a response of previous mayors and councils not kind of making the right investments in roads or it just getting away. But, well, whatever the case is, the long and short of it is that we're spending $11 million. And this year in our community, we have to, as best we can, minimize the increase to the taxpayer. If we have to forego some additional costs, I think it's the year to do it in. I frankly think this is important money, and I'd like to see it put back in the budget. But, you know, I think it's sensitive to City Hall. I think it's sensitive to City Hall to recognize what's going on in the community and to do its best to decrease its spending where it can without having a significant reduction in services. This is a reduction in services because there will be some problems in the spring that we won't be able to address in as timely ways we used to address. But we have to do our best to actually recognize in the community that people are struggling, and we have to make sure that we pass on as small of a cost as possible. This is one of those expenses that's important, but it has less of an impact on our taxpayers than some of the other things, like road removal, snow removal. So I would, as difficult as it is, I would be supportive of it in this case, on a one-time basis. Councilor Romano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and with the greatest respect, I'm going to disagree. I am all for trying to reduce the burden on the taxpayer, and I'm all for trying to find solutions to that. But quite frankly, some of these things that I'm hearing, and I hope you don't mind, Councillor Christian, I'm going to use one of your terms. I kind of feel like we're starting to get to the sucking and blowing kind of thing here. in one breath, we say 1 year to the next year to the next year, don't use surplus because it affects you next year. There's no difference in taking the 820 grand off of our roads only to put it back in the budget next year. We're still going to be at a shortfall next year, and we're going to have to come up with that 820,000. And we can't afford to not keep that money in the budget for at least the 2018 year. It has to go back in. But further to that, what's the effect of cutting it this year? I don't want to see that burden on the taxpayer. I really don't. And I want to think of every alternative way to save it. But that money gets used up. Every penny of it gets used up every year. And I'll make my comment now on snow removal as well as this item because they go hand in hand to me. I heard Councillor Hoopinen refer to this earlier and Councillor Myers with respect to the snowbank removal. But I would say that the number 1A and 1B complaints we all get, and I know I get every year, is number 1, snowbank removal, and number 2, road resurfacing in the spring. Those are the main things that on a miscellaneous level, if I can call it that I'm confronted with every single springtime and wintertime are those 2 items. And I'll talk about snow removal later on if we need to talk about that later on. I think that one's
so Councillor Mayor, you're talking
obvious.
about putting something back in. Like, we're going to get to there. I'm going to give you
I would not support cutting the 820 grand, and I would really caution us from doing so because we need it. The $1 million that we have in the capital budget is nowhere near enough to cover the cost of the road resurfacing, especially given our climate and the issues we face in the winter time and the way it affects us in the spring. Our roads are constantly in need of resurfacing, so many of them, and I'm not willing to cut that service.
Okay, so do we have any comments on the 820, and then we'll have a show of hands for taking it out of the budget and a show of hands for keeping it in. So comments? So Councillor Hoopinen and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question about liability with potholes in the spring.
Go ahead.
If they're not repaired and there is a car that drives over one that's a deep one, is there any liability to the city?
Sure, there is. And I don't think the idea is not to repair potholes. We would still be doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. Staff, is that correct?
The council, absolutely. I mean, if there's a pothole, we still have a pothole maintenance program.
Yeah. So that is not changing.
Okay. Thank you.
So what is the 820 resurfacing? Are we stripping the road?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, that's correct. So when we have a road that's a large failure, we'll go in and resurface it. There's several things that go on in that program. I'm sure Don Elliott can give you the details of all the different things that we do. But primarily, the maintenance side of it, the patching of the potholes, comes out of the maintenance budget. This is more from the engineering side, is doing larger repairs. Say you had a cross culvert in a major road that had to be repaired. Those are $30,000 and $40,000 repairs. It would come from something like this. And perhaps I can ask Don to elaborate on that a little.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the resurfacing is where we either mill and overlay arteries or collectors. We've done some work converting Class C roads, the surface-treated roads, the bus routes. We're making them asphalt now, one at a time. And for example, resurfacing, we did Pym Street this year from Wellington down to Queen. That is part of your resurfacing contract. And the surface treatment we did was Case Road this summer. Those are they're sizable resurfacing contracts.
So the CEO was going to add to that, and then.
And with what you just mentioned, was that $820,000 worth? Or it was more or less?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the resurfacing last year was in the 700,000 range plus the 300 for surface treatment. So last year's resurfacing program out of miscellaneous was about $1 million.
And what's the total budget? 1.3?
Mr. Mayor, the miscellaneous budget is 1.3 million. It's been $1 million since I was hired here 20 years ago. The 300 is surface treatment. We have several small things that we take out of that amount each year, such as biennial bridge inspections, our rear yard drainage account. There's several things that.
It's a bit of a catch-all.
Yes.
Did you want to add something, Mr. Davey, or grab
No,
it?
no, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask, but I think the question has been raised with Mr. Elliott, but maybe just to reaffirm it, in terms of expenditures on any given year, the full 1.3 million, how much of that is spent in each year?
Mr. Mayor, to council, or to CAO, we spend most of it. There's some projects there, sometimes there's an underrun, and it's because it's transferred to a capital account, it stays there, and we can apply it to the next year. But we aim to spend the whole thing, okay, each year.
Councillor Romano?
I'm just curious, Mr. Mayor, and I don't think it qualifies as a point of order, but I had tendered a resolution earlier, seconded by Councillor Christian. Before we vote on all of these items, I would think that depending on the results of that resolution, that may change people's or councillors' perspective on this item, on these individual items.
We can read the resolution. We can't vote on it now because we're in committee, but we can get a sense of whether it has broad support, and if it does, then that, I would agree, would change the direction of this whole thing.
Thank you.
So we can have the clerk read it.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this would be a motion by Councilors Romano and Christian. Whereas the 2017 budget presently would carry in residential taxes of 5.63, an increase in residential taxes of 5.63%, while maintaining services, and whereas the 2017 budget presently would carry an increase of 4.24% with a reduction in services, whereas cuts to services are not favorable to the people of Sault Ste. Marie, as noted in the various comments received from residents, and whereas increases in taxes are also not favorable to the people of Sault Ste. Marie, and whereas the corporation, the city of Sault Ste. Marie, presently has a positive debt ratio, especially when compared to other municipalities in Northern Ontario. Therefore, be it resolved that staff report to council by the December 6th, I believe it's meant 2016, not 2017.
Yeah, that would be correct.
Budget meeting, as to the available of financing capital improvements for the 2017 year up to $4 million, with the specific goal being to maintain current service levels as presented in the 2017 budget, at the 5.63% increase level, but to result in an increase of no more than 2% to residential taxes.
Okay, well, sorry guys, let's deal with this. We'll give, as per usual, if Councillor Romano and Councillor Christian want a chance to speak to this. I'm going to speak to it after they're done speaking to it, and maybe we can get a show of hands on whether this will go anywhere. Councillor Romano, we'll let you speak to this first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, let me say that this isn't something I necessarily recommend. This is not necessarily something I'm suggesting we do. I'm just looking at getting some information. Okay, before we make a decision, and I would say this to us all, we have made a pledge here to try to get our budget taken care of before April, which is when we used to do it, of the budget year. We are now in December. I don't think we need to jump and rush to make sure it's done today, tomorrow, or the next day. I would rather make sure we be diligent in our approach and leave no stone unturned. I am not a fan of necessarily borrowing money to look at ways for us to do just to simply reduce our levy for 1 year. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm talking about specifically capital improvements. And I think even earlier there was a bit of a discussion between Councillor Butland and our CFO with respect to this as road construction. I think some of these things can be looked at as capital improvements. I think they can be justified. But I would be very interested to see what the term of a loan would be, what the cost of the loan would be, cost of borrowing, interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not suggesting we just jump ahead and say, hey, let's do this, let's borrow. I'm saying let's just look at it and know that we have the options. That's all I'm asking we do, is be diligent in our approach. We are looking at right now a number of cuts that, quite frankly, I don't think the people of Sault Ste. Marie are going to stomach. I don't think we can handle an $820,000 cut to this miscellaneous budget. I don't think we can handle a $96,000 cut to our snow removal budget. I don't think we could handle even the house hazardous waste cut. I agree with Councillor Butlin's comments on that. That is a safety concern as well. I think we look at, and a great example is, let's look at last year's budget for an instance here, for a moment. We cut $265,000 out of our transit budget. What did that amount to? 0.25%. 0.25%, and you know what? We're still hearing about it today, a year later. We're still talking about the cuts that we had there. Sooner or later, I mean, I commend staff for the work they've done in coming to us, figuring out a way to get down to 4.24. But hey, we could just keep on doing this, and next year we could say, hey, you've got to cut. We know we got to add the $820,000 back in if we get rid of it this year. We've got to add in, there was the $217,000 or $227,000 that Councillor Shoemaker's motion to freeze staff's wages for a year. That's going to come back on the books. So already you're looking at over $1 million that has to go back in. Where's it going to come from? We could keep on talking about how we've got these programs and we're going to try and we're going to look at this stuff. But at the end of the day, we need something for today. I don't think we can stomach a 5.63% increase. Quite frankly, I don't think we can stomach a 4.24% increase. And I don't think the people out there are going to like either number. And I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference whether you have 4.24 or 5.63. But what will make a difference is these cuts that we are proposing. And when we come back next year to the table, looking at how do we make up that other percent and how do we deal with all the other service increases, cost increases we're going to have, what are we going to do? What's left to cut? Like, they've scraped the bottom of the barrel, and I appreciate the effort to do so. But at what point in time do we look at this and say, okay, we can't cut services anymore? Some of them I think are merited. But I just want to look at if we could come up with some of these capital improvement projects of ours, you know, maybe somewhere in the tune of a couple million. I only say up to 4. And I know I see everybody's face, and trust me, I'm the last person who wants to see.
I think we're just hoping you land the plane on this soon, Councillor.
I'm landing. Okay, it's a rough landing, but it's landing, right? Let's just consider it and see what the reports would say. That's all I'm asking. I just think we need to be diligent and look at all options. We have time.
Councillor Christian?
Crazy. Just kidding.
You know that because you think I think it's crazy.
Listen, I'm not one for borrowing money, but you know what? I don't think there's any harm in looking. When we're trying to pass a budget like this with a 4.5% tax increase and try to settle it in 5 hours, I don't think it hurts to look at it.
So I'll speak for maybe the people that aren't interested in doing this, and we can have a show of hands. I really do think that this isn't something we can even consider. I think what you do here is you create a $4 million hole.
Potentially.
You create a $4 million hole that you would then have to address next year. When you look at the 4.24, if we went down, or you look at the 5.69, like, staff has done an incredible job minimizing the costs that they actually directly influence. So what you're doing is you're financing the increases that aren't actually related to us. And we're creating a massive budget issue going forward. This is quintessential I hate the phrase, but you used it. This is quintessential sucking and blowing. This is saying at the same time, we don't want to increase any cuts and services, none of us do, but we also don't want to raise taxes, and none of us do, but we have to make hard decisions. As difficult as it is, that's what we're elected for. And these are the decisions we're faced with. Staff has increased their budgets, their human resource costs by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, not 1 or 2 or 3. And now we're saying, well, we should really look at borrowing. We don't need a report to tell us what that means. That means that we would not go get $4 million. We would borrow $4 million, even though our direct increase is around $2 million. So we would borrow to make up for the problem that we created when we applied the levy in the past. We would borrow to make up for the problems that were created with outside agencies increasing their levies. And we will next year be sitting here looking at each other, saying we have at least a $4 million hole. What do you do at that point? You either raise taxes or you go out and try and find the money. Because they're not going to, over the course of the year, be able to drive down their costs another $4 million. So I think borrowing $4 million just kicks our responsibility down the road. I have no issue if you folks want to deliberate more and you want to consider the information you heard tonight and you want to adjourn and you want to come back tomorrow night and have a discussion. I have no issue with that if you want to take your time. But to start a discussion about borrowing $4 million to fund our ongoing operating budget, I think is probably one of the most irresponsible fiscal decisions that we can make as a municipality.
Well, I'm sorry, but Mr. Mayor, that is not accurate at all. I am not suggesting we fund our continuing budget. I'm saying on capital improvements.
That's exactly what, those are part of our continuing operating budget.
But we need to look at it just from a perspective of capital improvements, and that's all I'm suggesting. And you know what, and I appreciate your comments, but I don't want it misconstrued that I'm looking at using debt to finance our ongoing budget. I'm talking about capital improvements, and there are several in our
So Councillor Turco's rightfully pointing out this isn't a debate, so I won't go any farther. Would there be support for this motion, a show of hands of people that would support doing this? No, it's not recorded. We're not voting. We can't vote. We're in committee of the whole. So if there would be, like, those of you that are interested in considering this further, so there really isn't really isn't any appetite to kind of go down this road. No one put up their hands. So Councillor Christian, Councillor Romano. So that brings us back to the list we were at. Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're, as you say, back to the list. Would there, two things. Number one, would there be any merit in looking at part of the 820? I'm just throwing this out there. Instead of the 820, it could be 410, it could be 400, for those who aren't comfortable with using the rest. Secondly, we still haven't dealt with the capital budget. And I'm wondering if we can put this on hold, get into the capital to see if there's something we can either remove from there or one-time costs that could be done from reserves. I know that reserves have been applied.
Or you could finance one-time costs.
Or you could
That's a different
finance
thing.
one-time costs. So I think I would suggest that we go into the capital, hold this right here to see if, because it impacts this. Our capital is part of that levy.
Does anybody have any suggestions they want to make about the capital budget? Because staff gave us the capital budget and staff doesn't recommend that we decrease the capital budget in any way. So does anybody have any suggestions about the capital budget? Councillor Nero?
At this point, they're not suggestions, they're more questions, because when I was looking at the capital budget sources, and it ties into the list of reserves that we were given tonight. I'm assuming they're all the reserves, but I can't find the sanitary sewer charge reserve account on this list that we received.
It's not there? Oh, sorry.
It's not on there, or it is on there?
Well, the CEO is saying it's not on there. I don't know why it would be.
Okay, number one, it's not on there. Number two, the dates that this is from 2015 and 2014. So, I mean, I don't know why I have this list, but I can't really refer to the capital budget with reserves with this list.
Two questions. Is the budget only 2015 because we haven't finished 2016 and you don't have an updated copy of this?
Mr. Mayor, yes, you are correct. That's the last audited statement that we have for the reserves. I have noted some items on the side that you will see for 2016 so that you'll know that which reserves are fully committed and which ones may or may not be available, just to give you some additional information. But we usually don't provide information to council until we have the full audited picture and we know exactly where we are with some of the reserves.
Okay, and the sanitary sewer charge would not fall on this list?
No, the sanitary sewer is actually in our capital fund, and that's restricted money. It can only be used for sanitary sewer projects, and it's not a reserve as such that you see on that list in front of you. It's more money held in, I guess you could say almost in trust for the sanitary sewer capital projects that are coming forward.
Yeah, and understanding that, I guess that's where I started to look at the capital budget and the list of the different amounts that we have: roads, bridges, storm sewers, 24.6 million, sanitary sewers, 7.2 million. When I look at that, I guess I made the assumption that we used as much of the sanitary sewer charge account that we could, some $8.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. There's no more to use towards sewers and sanitary of this capital budget.
That's all that's required in this capital budget for this year. And yes, there is additional funds in place, which are going to be funding such things as our biosolids and the West End treatment plant upgrades in the following year. So when you look at your capital budget, you'll see it goes out to 2019. You'll see other uses of funds.
Well, I think one of the reasons why we decreased the sanitary sewer surcharge, Councilor Nero, is we were collecting more than we could use. So the reserve was going up substantially.
Right, and that's what I'd like to see if we could use some more of it. But, and I know we reduced our collecting of it.
Yeah, we can only use it on those projects.
Right.
And we're doing the maximum number of those projects already that we can do.
So it would bring me to the comment that you made, Mr. Mayor. Are there any of these projects that are one-time uses that we could go to long-term debt instead of using our levy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, you'll notice on the summary of projects that what is on the current levy is $7.5 million. So that's your capital allocation that's included in the operating budget, and that is for road programs. And again, our roads, as Mr. Elliott has said, the budget has been the same pretty much forever. The one part of that $7 million, we are suggesting we reallocate, which is the $800,000 for the miscellaneous construction and decreasing that. So we will reduce that current levy of $7,540,000 by $820,000 if council approves the one option. The other piece is our regular amount, which is approximately $6.2 million, which is the same amount we've always had on the operating levy for our roads. And if we do reduce that and borrow, all you're doing is decreasing the amount that's available the next year because we have to pay that long-term debt off. So we're shrinking that $6.2 million for every amount that we borrow forward for that. That's why I said this is more like an operating amount. It's the same amount year after year after year after year.
But something like Public Works Fleet, 1.1 million, that's in capital, right?
The Public Works is financed through a reserve.
It doesn't say, well, okay, the total capital could come from the reserve, I guess. Transit fleet, same thing?
Correct.
Fire fleet?
Correct.
So those are all reserves. Okay.
Yeah, no, I went through that.
I think I've gone as far as I can right now.
Councillor Mano?
Thank you. This is what, perhaps when you don't have it in writing in front of you, that there was lost on council, that resolution that Councillor Christian and I just advanced is relating to this. This is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about capital improvements, one-time expenditures. We're not talking about to pay for ongoing maintenance. So
But that's not what they are, though, Councillor Mano. They're not one-time expenditures. They're built into our budget on an annual basis. We don't have any one-time expenditures here that you could finance.
Mr. Mayor, again, you just made the comment right before this floor was opened up that we could look at financing some of these if we wanted to. That's exactly what
I said
we're
you could look
referring
at financing one-time expenses if you wanted to.
That's the point I'm trying to get at. That's what we're talking about.
I think, yeah, these are on annual ongoing expenses.
Okay, again, that's fine. We've already taken a show of hands. It was just to look at it as an option so that we had some information on these capital improvements. So I'm sure there are some, sorry, my microphone is on. That's all I was looking at. And if we could get some information from our staff to suggest, hey, look, this particular project over here is one that we're doing and it's something that we could potentially look at financing and we could save, and the number's not 4, I said up to 4. If we got $1 million on one, guess what? We don't have to worry about cutting $1 million out of the budget elsewhere. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay, but we dealt with that, and we're not going down that road. So Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you. Just for clarification, City Hall is a corporation. What we're looking at is operational. It's just like I own a business. We need these pieces to operate our business. If hypothetically we went out and got financing, to the mayor's point, which is a very good point, it's a one-time deal, not to do with operations, but something to maybe create, hypothetically, job growth or something like that. But this is operational, and you're going down a slippery slope if you're going to ever finance your operational aspect.
We're not talking about operations.
Councillor Romano, please.
Thank you.
No, but here's the long and short of it. Councillor Nero raised a point. Is there anything in the capital budget that we could take out of the capital budget that would end up reducing the levy, but that can be financed on a one-time basis? So it doesn't create an ongoing hole in the budget. That's really what you're trying to get at, right, Councillor Nero? So that's the question. So if I can direct that specific question to our senior management team, if we can get an answer to that question, I've asked it. I think the answer to the question is no. But if it's not no, then we can look at that. Because the only other thing you can do is look at reducing the amount of money we spend on roads and look at reducing the roads budget. But to Councillor Butlin's point, we have, a roads deficit. So is that a responsible thing to do? So the treasurer or the CEO, is there anything in the capital budget that can be removed from the capital budget so as to decrease the levy, but that would be appropriate for one-time financing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not that I would recommend, because what's on the overall capital that is in the operating budget is related to roads. I do want to refer council to a report that was provided to you March 22nd of 2016 during 2016 budget deliberations, and it's called Long-Term Debt to Reduce the Capital Allocation. All of these options were reviewed and presented at that time, and our recommendation has not changed since that time.
But to the specific question, there's nothing we could take out of the roads budget?
Not that I would recommend, no.
Okay, outside of your recommendation, is there anything that we could take out of the roads budget that would not have the effect of a year after year effect? That's a one-time expense.
If you're borrowing for capital, all you're doing is shrinking your ongoing allocation. So you're just continuing on.
Yeah, so if we decrease the roads budget by $2 million, we're at $2 million less next year.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you even cut a road out of the capital roads budget, you're risking losing your federal gas tax refunding, grant funds that we are leveraging with our allocation.
So Councillor Christian's making a good point. Let's set aside the roads budget. In any of the rest of the capital budget, is there anything that you could kind of isolate from the rest of the capital budget, or is that all year-over-year expenses?
The rest of the capital budget is financed outside of an operating levy. It's reserves, grants, other capital funds, sanitary sewer. So it's really just the roads that's our ongoing allocation.
So that's what you're looking at.
That's why the resolution is before, and that's the point I make. If we don't have the information, we're wasting a lot of time.
Okay. So, Councillor Nero, I think that kind of closes that circle for you, or do you want to canvass that a bit farther?
Just one additional clarification then. We talked about the 820,000. If we use it, I understand it's not recommended. We're looking for giving staff time to make it back up for the 2018 so we could put it back in. So I go back to the capital budget. And let's assume for a second I'm okay with let's do the 820,000. I might not be okay taking it from miscellaneous construction. So some of these items that we have in our operating budget year after year, fleet maybe, are we not able to take portions from each of those items to get to that 820 instead of the miscellaneous construction, and still on the same premise that we would find that money to put it back next year?
Well, let staff answer that question.
Same kind, taking it from out of the budget, but putting it back, but taking it from somewhere else.
So taking a bit from a bunch of different reserves?
Different area. Those reserves that I talked about, transit fleet, fire fleet, public works fleet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. I'm going to pick on Public Works. They seem to be getting picked on a lot. But we did reduce the reserve transfer last year by $300,000. They are already crunched. So if we reduce the amount that they're going to have in the reserve, because that's what's in the operating budget, we're going to reduce their ability to replace the fleet. And they already have sacrificed $300,000 a year ongoing for their transit fleet replacement, and it's been challenging for them, and I'm sure Mr. Girardi can speak to it further, being able to replace their fleet.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. Again, we talk about this put back. Well, the $300,000 was taken last year with the intention that it would be put back. We're not even talking about putting it back. We're talking about cutting it further. I'm trying to keep a $25 million fleet rolling and putting good rolling stock on the roads. We're keeping trucks over 10 years now. That just extends the length of the years of the trucks that I have to keep. So that money you might think is a lot of money, but if I have a $40,000 differential go on a truck or on a grader, that's a big expense, and that chops that $1 million down fairly quick. I would not recommend going to fleet in that form or in those reserves.
Okay.
Okay, so on the 820, and I think Councilor Nero had a good suggestion. So if there isn't appetite for the 820, we could maybe float whether there was appetite for a lesser number. But, you know, just to determine where we're at with that, is there, Councilor Myers?
On that, though, Mr. Mayor, if we go for the lesser number, we have to take it up on the levy.
That's right.
So, I mean, at this point, I think we're starting to talk about quarters. I mean, because if we're at 4.24, and we took the 820 and cut it in half, now we've got to add 400,000 to that 8.24. That's going to push us up to
4.64.
Excuse me, 4.24. Add 400,000 to it, and that's going to push us up another almost 0.5% of levy. So, I think we should call a straw vote on the indication of what's been presented.
Well, that's what I was going. Is there interest in, what's the interest around the table in including the 820,000 reduction in our levy here? So,
you want to show hands now?
Yeah, show of hands. To apply it to the levy. Show.
Can you go, Mr. Mayor, maybe the other way around? Half and then go for the full?
No.
No?
No, we're gonna.
This is the report in front of us.
We're dealing with the 820. The 820 is in front of us. If you're not comfortable with the 820, then you don't have that comfort level. But we're trying to determine who's got comfort level with what's been presented.
Okay.
And then if you're not there, but if there's 7 people that have comfort level with that, we'll put it up on the board. If there isn't, we'll go with a different number that's suggested by council. So on the 820, so the 820 would be included in as a reduction. So that would reduce the levy by 0.82. So who is comfortable with that reduction? So there's 8 people that are comfortable with that reduction. So if you can put that reduction on the board, Michelle. So that deals with what staff's put before us. And that gets us down to 4.24. Okay, so we still haven't dealt with the supplemental, right? So that's still in front of us, so we have to go to the supplemental budget. So if we can go to the supplemental requests. So we'll just take them one at a time. The first one is none of these supplemental requests are recommended by staff. The first one is the membership in FCM. I've got no passion or desire for this. It was just a discussion that I had with some councilors about re-engaging with FCM. The issue I had with FCM is for a number of years we paid for the membership, but no one ever went. I had no intention to go as I started out because I had a lot of work to do here. I would, if we renewed the membership, begin going to FCM and engaging in that. My goal for the last 2 years of this mayoralty was to really start getting out on behalf of the community and spending more time outside of City Hall and promoting the city than maybe inside City Hall working with staff, which would probably make them happy. So It doesn't, if council doesn't have the appetite to do this year, I'm completely fine with that. I take no issue with it, and we could revisit the matter next year. So it was in there because of some conversations I had with some councilors about rejoining, and if we did rejoin, I would start going. If this isn't the year to do it, I'm completely okay with that. Councillor Butland, did you want to, Councillor Myers?
Mr. Mayor, does the membership go by, it's apportioned? So, for example, if we joined, we would rejoin it. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's say when our budget came back, if there were some surplus funds or whatnot, if we rejoined in March, we can join any time during the year. We don't have to do it now.
Then I would suggest that we certainly keep it on the radar, but let's monitor it and come back, and we can just do it by resolution of council, correct? It doesn't have to be part of this deliberation?
Absolutely. So we can just knock that one right off.
Thank you.
Okay, so FCM's knocked off. Now, this next request, the 200,000, a number of us in conversation think that's a very important ask. I thought so too, so I had some discussions with staff about that, and staff believe they could reallocate that money without increasing the levy. We can ask them how they would do that, where they would do that from, and then if we're agreeable to that, we could direct them to do that when we get out of committee of the whole. Did you want to, CEO, want to speak to this?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, and I'll look to the CFO to explain as well. And at the risk of reopening the debate, one of the avenues that we looked at was, again, it's $1.3 million that's there for the resurfacing, so it would be taking an initial 200,000 over top the 820 that has been identified, and do that for each of the next 3 years to offset the cost of the downtown plan. So that was one of the options that we suggested would be available. Downtown development is a key priority within the corporate strategic plan, and particularly under community development. And so we definitely have that appetite as well. But again, the avenue is one that we've already discussed in terms of the offset would be in the maintenance accounts.
We'll start with, we'll just go right around the horn this way. So Councillor Butland, Myers, Romano.
Yeah, I appreciate the 200,000 is important. I suspect all of us would agree. But we'll find a way of doing it. Why is this different from some of the other things that have been mentioned? And saying we'll look at taking it away from the miscellaneous construction. I'm aghast that was a consideration. These are two separate items, and I don't want to mix miscellaneous construction with the downtown association, because I still believe that we should do, excuse me, the 820,000 this year. And the idea of looking at it next year, and we'll try to get it in, as Mr. Girardi said, we took 300,000 last year, we'll put it back in next year. We didn't, we won't, and it probably won't be next year either. So mixing the two, I don't support at all.
Okay. So Councillor Myers?
This is coming from somewhere else, but this is 200,000 a year for the next 3 years, correct? I believe that was the project. And I believe when we had the presentation, that was going to leverage close to 900,000 from other levels of government, I believe. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would refer that question to the city planner.
Right. So, oh, sorry. Mr. McConnell?
Mr. McConnell's going to speak to it. He's waiting for his mic. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We believe the 600,000 will leverage 950,000 in federal funding and an additional 950,000 in provincial funding, for a total of 1.9 million. And in addition, based on the structure of the small grants that we give out, we're anticipating as an absolute minimum an additional $600,000 in private sector investment, which would give us a return of just over 3 million on our 600,000. And those numbers we're very comfortable with. Those are much less than, as council's aware, this is the third time we've undertaken a downtown program, and those numbers are much less than what we have actually achieved in the past.
Okay, and where I wanted to go there, Mr. Mayor, is two thoughts. The first is there's absolutely no way this doesn't meet the definition of economic development. Is the Economic Development Corporation eligible to be someone who could invest in this project with still accessing the other two levels of funding, or does it have to be the municipality? Through you, Mr. McConnell, if it was an EDC funding of looking for the matched funding, or not matched, it's more than matched, or does it have to be the municipality that's the partner?
These are municipal projects.
These are municipal projects, yes, and all of our discussions with the senior levels of government have been on this basis.
Okay, and because where I'm going there is that this is economic development in the greatest definition possible of what this investment is. It's not, I mean, Queen Street is a city-owned street, I get that, but I mean, I know that the Economic Development Corporation does invest in projects, so I guess I wanted to know whether or not that's an avenue we could go down to seek the $200,000 from economic development. The other thought is, I'm almost twitching at saying it, considering what we've just gone through the last half hour. Is this something that would be considered a capital investment that we could look at?
Financing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a limited 3-year
Because it's limited.
fund.
We know exactly what it is once a year for 3 years.
Maybe we can have yep.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Myers. Yes, you could consider it, but I don't know if the amount is enough that we could get reasonable rates for it's $200,000 per year. We'd have to borrow the whole amount up front.
Yeah. Okay, well, so.
Those are my questions.
Understood, Councillor Romano? Go ahead.
Where is sorry, I don't appreciate from the initial comments for CEO, where's this $200,000 a year coming from for the next 3 years? Please help me out.
It's coming from your miscellaneous construction budget. That's the staff's suggestion. So that budget's 1.3.
The 820 grand.
That budget's 1.3. There's 500 left in it, and there would be then 300 left in it after this was removed, if council agreed with that.
So basically, we're going to prioritize one major priority over another.
It's a major priority, yeah.
Well, they're both major priorities. Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so we have Councillor Bruni and then Councillor Nero.
I'll be very short. We are going to be removing the $200,000 from the reduction of the miscellaneous construction, and PWT takes the hit again for the next 3 years. So $600,000 coming out of that account after we hopefully can refurbish it to increase it, the shortfall of $820,000 that we're pulling out this year. Yeah, so I would disagree with that, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Nero, Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to follow up on Councillor Meyer's suggestion that we go to long-term debt on the 200, but Ms. Schell has said that may not be enough to get good rates. So how do we expand on this? What do we need to ask for to get a rate that's...
Let me suggest this. I get the sense that council really would like to see this $200,000 a year allocated for 3 years. Am I correct in that? Show of hands. I also get the sense that you don't want to see this show up on the levy as an addition to the levy. Is that correct? Okay. But I also get the sense that you're very remiss to decrease a miscellaneous construction budget that's now gone from 1.3 to 500,000 very quickly. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So let's pull this 200,000 out and send this 200,000 back to staff and say to staff, this is an important priority, council. We want to figure out how to do this. We're open to looking at borrowing to do this, but come back to us with some options on how we could fund this 600,000 over the next 3 years without affecting the levy, without affecting the miscellaneous construction budget, and with having the littlest effect on the levy as possible, because you recognize borrowing has an effect on the levy. So with having a minimum effect on the levy. So if we can take that 200 up and send it back to staff, is that agreeable to everybody? Okay, so now that is gone, and we're looking back at that list, it occurred to me that maybe I could pass it to council and say, are there any items on this list that you want to see included in the budget. So we'll start with you, Councillor Bruni.
Just want to talk about the art gallery. I mean, they came here, they did a presentation. They're in desperate needs, and they're requesting 400,000. How much to the CFO?
I think, my understanding of that, and I don't think they were requesting an additional 400,000. I think that they were requesting that their budget go from what it currently is.
Well, that's what I'm asking the
to
question.
400,000.
Yeah. What is it right now?
The art gallery?
Yep.
If you could just give me 1 minute. And
Yep, take your time.
And I could be incorrect. Maybe they asked for an additional 400,000.
No, that's the question I wanted to ask.
Do you want to know what they get now?
What do they get now, and did they ask for their budget to be brought up to 400, or did they ask for an additional 400 is the question?
My understanding was that it was a one-time item, so I don't think I have the right answer for what Mr. Bruni's asking.
Councillor Romano's declaring a conflict because his wife sits on that board, so that'll be noted, Councillor Romano. So I do not believe it was a one-time ask. Like they're in dire, my understanding of their presentations was they were in dire straits and they wanted an increase in their budget to $400,000. Go ahead.
Their current grant is $180,785.
Okay. So Councillor Bruni, do you have anything else to offer on that?
Well, is this a 400,000 one-time cost on top of the 180?
Well, we can, I certainly understood that the ask to be that they wanted a budget, an annual ongoing budget of 400,000. In addition, like not in addition to what they had, but inclusive of what they had. That's how I understood their presentation.
So they're asking for $200,000 more, 200,000 plus.
220,000 a year, yeah.
So why isn't 220 on here instead of the 400,000?
Because I think staff interpreted them to be asking for 400,000 on a one-time basis. That's how staff interpreted it. So
we don't know the answer then.
I would like to try and do something for the art gallery, but maybe we have to get some clarity from the art gallery and like we could move forward on our budget without that one line item. We could adjust that once we get the clarity from the art gallery, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, Councillor Bruni?
The next one is the bush plane, the 75,000.
Well, let's just settle the art gallery issue there.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
can't settle it.
Yeah, so what we're going to do then, because we're not clear on what the art gallery is asking for, we're just going to put that issue aside, and we'll have some discussions with them, and then we'll bring it back to council. Okay?
Fair enough.
No. Okay, so Councillor Bruni?
And then the 75,000 for the bush plane museum. What was that request for? Was it
ongoing funding?
Renovations or?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, my understanding for that, it was ongoing operations. They needed additional grant money from us to continue their operations on a regular basis.
And if they don't receive the 75,000?
Well, they gave us a presentation that day, Councillor Bruni. They're going to continue to function.
They'll continue to function?
Well, I mean, I didn't hear them say they wouldn't. I mean, they were, all of you folks were present that day. What was the impression you had? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I do think we need to include the Sault Ste. Marie Museum, and one of the reasons why is because that our senior staff, not our senior staff, because all of our non-union staff are frozen, they're frozen too. So we would generally increase the museum by whatever increase our non-union staff were getting. So I think because they're frozen and the museum's such a small budget, I don't see why we wouldn't make that adjustment for them. Is there any disagreement with making that $3,500 adjustment for the museum?
And that is for what, the 3,500?
It's annual operating.
For the wages?
No, if you remember when they were here, they said they just requested a modest increase as we saw fit. Well, it's not specifically for that. They just asked for a very small increase to their budget. That's all they said. It will not impact the levy. So are we agreeable to add in the $3,500 to the museum? Okay. So that leaves us with Fringe North. It's a festival that we received a presentation at council, Councilor Turco. There's a group of people that want to do a fringe festival in Sault Ste. Marie, and we're supporting them in kind to the tune of $8,000. And in addition to that in kind, they're looking for another $15,000. So do we have any appetite on council to provide those funds to them?
Can they apply for anything? In one of the committees?
So we're looking, Councillor Rooney?
St. Marie for this funding?
I don't know whether they would or they wouldn't. They were sent to us and they made the ask, and that's where it's at. I'm just looking to see if any city councillors are interested in moving that or putting it on the...
Yeah, I think they should go to the Tourism Sault Ste. Marie, Ian McMillan.
Okay. So we're going to have staff report back to us in the $200,000, and we're also postponing the art gallery matter. So subject to those two matters, what are we at, Commissioner Schell? Or...
So all I'm adding is 3.6,
$3,551.
4.25.
4.25. Okay, so now, if council wants to have a discussion about going lower than this, we have to go into caucus. Well, I was just, if you weren't raising one, we weren't putting it on. So are there any matters on the supplemental list before I close it off that any of you councilors want to see added to the spreadsheet? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Just for clarification, going back to the Bush Plane Museum, that was $75,000, correct? Yeah. Was that because they were trying to get some matching funds?
I don't recall that specifically.
Because I know that they're doing some expansions, and they did talk about government grants that they've been applying for. So I just want clarification. Was it to do with matching funds?
They gave us all the presentation at the same time. My impression it would request to increase their operating budget. Go ahead, Councillor Mano.
No, I really don't need the mic. The $75,000 has been a routine expense. The additional, they had asked for additional funds from us in order to leverage further money from the through the CMOG grant. That was something we wrote to the then Minister Coutu about and received a fairly unfavorable response. But short answer, no. The $75,000 is a yearly that we've been paying towards them, and they have sought additional from us. We've said no.
Okay, so we've been through all of staff's presentations. We have considered the extra reductions that they put before us for our decisions. We have considered the supplemental requests. If City Council wants to go through an additional round of considerations, that would be a third pass at this, we would have to go in a caucus. We have two options in that respect. We could go in a caucus now, or we could return tomorrow and go into caucus when we return tomorrow. So is the general desire to go into caucus now? So Councillor Nero?
I would move that we go into caucus now.
Okay. So we're going to pass this off to the clerk and he'll walk us through this procedurally.
First of all, Mr. Mayor, members of council, we need to rise from committee of the whole. So I would have the following motion by Councillors Krampadich and Butland. Resolved that the committee of the whole council now rise without reporting on the matter referred to it by City Council 2017 budget deliberations.
All in favor? Carried.
I would have that then have council pass a motion by Councillors Krampadich and Butland resolve that this council now go into caucus to discuss potential budget cuts having a labor relations component.
All in favor? Carried.